Welcome everybody to the I don't know which episode this is. I'm probably not even going to bother numbering them because I'll forget and lose count anyway. So, one of the earliest episodes of the Edge Rowing podcast. Lucky to say our guest here is Taylor Perry. Taylor is an under 23 world champion, a former senior Canadian national team rower, competed at multiple world championships. He's raced in every boat class apart from the single and the double. Um, and he's also now a coach with us at Edge Rowing. Yeah, Taylor is actually, I don't know if I've actually told him this, but I remember I was watching the World Under 23s, and I think it was maybe 2015 or 14. And I saw there was somebody short racing, and I was just at the time obsessed with finding people that weren't massive and trying to figure out if it's possible to go quick when you're not 6'6". But anyways, that's how I first heard the name. Anyways,
Oh no,
Taylor,
that's my first time.
yeah, I probably wanted to not hit off with that off the start and freak you out
No,
and get
that's totally fine.
who's this freak looking me up on the internet. But anyways, Taylor, welcome. Yeah, it's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. So, generally, what we like to do is just have a good deep dive into you and your background. Obviously, I know a lot about you, but it would be awesome to like learn a bit more. But then also we can kind of go into your background and how you got into the sport, the ups and the downs of your journey. I know how much value and advice that you have through your experiences and your passion to share. So that's the big objective, and we always want the listener to kind of maybe walk away with at least one actionable thing after the episode. But yeah, you've also worked with like loads of really cool coaches and stuff. But anyways, I'll stop rambling. Taylor, maybe take us back. How did you get into the sport of rowing, and sort of like what age was that?
So I took my first strokes in the fall of 2007. So that would have been my first year of grade 9. And I was introduced to it by a friend who lived down the street from me, and he and I were always like trading back and forth sports that we were trying out. So for example, I grew up sailing. I come from
Yeah.
a sailing family, and I'd been doing it for like maybe 10 years. Uh, Actually, no, I would have been doing it for about maybe like 5 or 6 years. And by the time he picked it up, within a year, he was already better than I was.
Oh, damn.
And yeah, so being a year older than me, when he went off to high school, he suggested, "Hey, why don't you try rowing? You know, like you get to miss a little bit of class every now and then, which I
Yep.
didn't have
Sold.
a problem with. Yeah, um, you get to experience like an incredible team dynamic, and you get to be on the water and like watch the sun come up every morning. And so I initially started it for two reasons. The first was I had never made a school team before. I'd tried out for like almost every single sport that my school had to offer and didn't make it. And our rowing team was so small in its second year. There was probably three people on the team the year before. So when I joined the team, they didn't cut anybody. So I sort of like
Nice.
made the team without having to worry about not having a place on there. And also I wanted to compete against my friend
Yep.
and try and get better than him. Yeah. So
What do you think it was
so
that was maybe like what weren't you good at, or what did you struggle with in the other sports? Or
well, I went to school with a lot of really talented athletes. Most of the kids I went to school with that were my age were AAA hockey players, so they were really good athletes, very disciplined. Like they were going to practice at 6 a.m. and they were training before school and after school. They'd be either competing in games or they would be going to practices again too. And when you achieve that level of sport from such a young age, uh, there's a lot of transferable skills and excellence that sort of carries over and everything too. So most of those kids would make like the volleyball team, the cross country team,
yeah,
the
yeah,
basketball
yeah,
team.
yeah.
And so I was competing against people who had been doing this for a long time, and I never really had that sort of um, introduction to sport, if you will. Like
You're one of the
I
rare Canadians that didn't play hockey.
I never played any contact sport.
Parents
Yeah,
wouldn't allow it.
yeah, I've always gravitated to really technical sports. I
Yeah.
really admire hockey players for their technical skill that they bring to it. and basketball players as well too, because I played basketball since I was like 4 years old. But the only thing that changed was I got taller. I was a terrible shot. I got more exercise running up and down the court than actually contributing to the game.
Sounds like the
But
start of a good rower.
yeah, I clearly had. I was always the your kid's got heart, but we don't know what he's gonna turn into.
Yeah, it's interesting that I wonder how much with like athletic development and stuff is just about how much sport you're exposed to at an early age because I only really started organized sport and after like when I turned 11. And I was behind for a bit, but I did catch up. So, but like just became obsessed with it and was constantly throwing balls around and stuff. So, it's
Nice.
interesting that what influences you. Okay. So, getting into the sport. So yeah, what was it that drew you to the sport originally then?
Well, wanting to be on a team was the big thing for me. It's one thing entirely to feel like you're wanted on a team,
Hmm.
and I had my own sort of issues with that when I was going to school with other kids, like not feeling like I was wanted there necessarily. Um, and it's a really great thing to be wanted on a team, but it's another thing entirely to feel like you're needed on a team. Like
Hmm.
you can't go out and row in an eight if there's seven people. You can't go out and row in a four if there's three people. So knowing that you depend on
Yeah.
your teammates and they depend on you, I was really drawn to that team dynamic of it.
Okay. Um, right. So then, moving into the more competitive side of it, then, like what? Okay, so it was initially kind of the camaraderie and the team environment. Um, what was it that started? Is that what kind of always kept you in it for those first couple of years, or was there any sort of itch you started to feel that you had to scratch?
It was really funny because that like first initial year, I hated exercising. I hated getting sweaty. I hated pushing myself, which is I mean,
Really?
if my 13-year-old me met 30-year-old me now and saw like what I became as a result of that, he'd laugh, I'm sure. He'd be like, what the, that's not me at all. So but I grew up in a really competitive household, and that was I'd say always present with me. I always competed in just about everything that I did, but I also knew how to turn it on and off. Like I really can't stand people that compete in everything all the time. Like
See, I think I'm like I don't I think I'm good at balancing it, but Pauline always tells me that I'm like super competitive with like loads of little things and yeah, I just sound a bit neurotic like denying it, but apparently I'm not good at balancing it. I always thought I was.
well, some people who are like, you go out for dinner with an old teammate and they're like, "Oh, I finished my meal before you." It's like I didn't know it was a race. I usually just tell them I let them win. So I actually like to enjoy my food and digest it. So
Then you're the real
but
winner.
exactly, yeah, that's
You
right,
choose your
yeah,
food thoroughly.
yes, that's right. But my dad, being a really competitive man in business and being a really competitive sailor, like I would, as a kid, I'd go out and race with him two nights a week, just through our local club, and his attention to detail was what really drew me into all those like positive aspects of sport
Okay.
because there are so many ways that you can tune and rig a sailboat to make it go fast, and I was seeing a lot of those things in real time. Because if you're sailing upwind on a course, you can clearly see if you're beating somebody else, and even if you're competing in the exact same type of boat as somebody else, you would see like, oh well, we trimmed the sails this way, or
Hmm.
I adjusted the rig so that we can get better lift out of the sails. Like
Okay.
he was nuts about all those small details, and that really rubbed off on myself. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and then my mother, of course, like she was in banking growing up, so she was always really good with numbers. Like a lot of that wore off on me too. Um, so I had like an affinity to look at things in the small details, and then being able to quantify it as well too. So that really set a really good, healthy platform for me as an athlete when I eventually moved into rowing.
Mm. Okay. And do you think maybe the other sports like basketball and hockey, because they didn't have that sort of technical side of it that pushed you away, like there wasn't that option to, I don't know, I guess tape your stick differently. You can't really do that in hockey, can you?
Yeah, I mean, as far as those technical points go, I'm not sure, but um, I really just wanted to be on a team because like when
Yeah,
I was
okay.
in sixth grade and seventh grade, I would walk to school at 6 o'clock in the morning by myself to go to these practices. Um,
In the
so I
winter as
definitely had,
well.
yeah, and you know what Canadian winters can
Oh
be like.
yeah.
So like Southern
Yeah,
Ontario
minus
Canadian
40. I grew
winters.
so for those that don't know, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, which is like Ontario except better. Um but yeah, and
Okay.
well colder as well. But yeah, minus 40 and my dad would still make me walk to school. Because the diesel in the
Yeah,
buses would freeze at minus 36.
yeah, that's crazy. It never got quite that cold there, but I feel like anything below minus 15 or minus 20 is still pretty cold. Yeah,
Yeah. For all you
but
Americans out there, convert it yourself. Just convert to
well,
Celsius, really. Yeah.
minus 40 Fahrenheit is 40 degrees, minus 40 Celsius. So
Okay,
yeah,
there we go. Well, you are a numbers guy. I'm sitting here
yes.
with my maths degree. But anyways, okay. So pretty determined then and like that drive to do those like early mornings. Do you think that was purely the team side of it and then wanting to belong in those kind of environments? Is that or it wasn't like, oh, I want to improve on my 2K, or was it, I guess, you want to improve your rowing so that you can be a valued member in the team?
I was really looking for a community to be a part of, and something that I could sort of call my own, because no one in my family rowed or knew anything about rowing. So I can like happily say that I was the first one to do that, and obviously, took it way too far and enjoyed it way too much. But I really just wanted to be um, involved with something that was bigger than myself, because sailing can be a very solitary sport, just like rowing can be as well. But I wanted to experience the dynamic and the teamwork and building something with my teammates of value.
Hmm.
So I would say that that initially is what got me to do it. But I felt like I possessed the mind to be able to do it, and obviously that's like a nature and nurture thing. I think rowing
Yeah.
helped nurture that,
Okay.
um, and and just being around um, really healthy, competitive people growing up. I learned the importance of like when you're in it, you dig your heels in and you give it everything you've got. But then after that, as soon as you get back to the dock, it's done. And if you have any disagreements or anything, like you settle it before you get into the
By
change room. You
punching them in
settle
the
it.
face.
Yeah,
No.
luckily, I got to that point, but yeah, I was always a solution driven athlete, if you will,
Okay.
trying to, yeah,
Diplomat.
yes, I as best as I could have been at the
Okay.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, so yeah, and like something you touched on earlier there before, like which Taylor and I spoke about before. So I was around that, I don't know. So what age was this around? You say like 13 or something, or
I started when I was 13. Yeah.
yeah, so around that same age, I was kind of like felt alone, like was being bullied from that age. And then kind of when I found sport, it it gave me a bit of confidence in my ability to like fit in and kind of yeah, be a valued member in the team. And I was still a wee weirdo, so I was pretty easy bully target, but I think and I was insecure about that. But then as I started to work hard when I was playing hockey at the time, as I started to work hard and get better at it, despite me being weird, I'm still myself. I could feel, it's maybe not the best way to go about it, but felt some sort of acceptance through other people, and it gave me a bit of confidence in myself. I'm curious to ask, like, what sort of did you notice a change or a difference in confidence or how you felt like going through that at such a young age, as you continued with rowing?
I think as it developed through high school, I definitely, I wouldn't say carried myself a different way. I felt that, most of the time, like my interactions with other kids, like through elementary school, that I had to sort of like put on a mask and be different than how I actually am. But
Yeah,
when I actually went to row, I felt like that expression of myself, like I could make jokes about things and not have to worry about,
yeah,
ridicule or anything like that. I mean, you know how kids are, how
yeah.
they'll
Kids can
take
be
anything.
dicks.
Definitely. Yeah. But uh, I think the foundation was there to um, really turn it into something that I enjoyed, and I met a lot of really great people who I'm
Mhm.
still friends with to this day, and I've been doing it for more than half my life at this point. So it's been a huge there's been a huge impact on my life just being involved
Yeah.
with sport and the
Yeah.
friendships that you make. So yeah.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. I always wonder kind of like what path I would have taken if I'd picked up rowing from a young age. Um, yeah, it's interesting that I never felt smart when I was in school, I would say, or like I think one thing rowing did teach me was the kind of value of and the feedback of just you put one thing in, you get one thing out, and if you increase that, input you get. It's I can't think of many sports where the output is so directly related to your input. And it
Yeah.
can help, I think, with like building confidence, not just in like your ability to like row faster, but just in general apply to like all sort of other areas in life. But no, it's interesting, really interesting to hear. For you, like when did you start to kind of get more competitive with it, I guess, or when did you start to, look at kind of the bigger races in the country?
So I graduated high school in 2011, and at that point, I stopped rowing and went off to college. And I didn't go to a school that had a rowing program. And at the time, I was like, I'm fine with this. I had some like good experiences. I
What
made
school
some.
did you go to?
I went to Mohawk College and
Okay.
I studied marketing there. And my plan at that point was, um, I really wanted to get into advertising, and I wanted to. I was I was really obsessed with you see certain commercials for certain products that have like such a really great hook to them where there's like a twist or a double entendre in it, and I was like I would really love to be a part of that, something that like really catches your eye, because every
Hmm.
time I see one of those it was like, oh, I really like that was quite witty, or that was really intelligent how they put that together. And so that's what I wanted to go into. um, but while I was at school, I was still erging twice a week, and I was lifting weights with some of my friends basically every day. And those two times a week I was on the erg, I was going faster at that point than I was in high school training 6 days a week.
Okay.
So around Christmas 2011, I ended up bumping into the club captain at my home club, which is Leander Boat Club in Hamilton, Ontario,
Ah,
and
the fake one?
the fake one. That's right.
The
Yeah.
fake one. Okay, cool.
Martin Cross has teased me about that it's a knockoff. Um, but I bump into the club captain, and he says, there's a bunch of us. He's about 10 years older than me, and I guess it would have been about 19 at this point. And he said, um, a bunch of us are going to start an Olympic weightlifting program, and that was something I'd never done before. High school rowing was like, you max out leg extensions, or you max out the leg press machine, and like that was basically it. But now someone was going to come in, teach us how to squat properly, how to deadlift properly, how to do clean and jerk snatches. And I was really into that. And within 3 months of starting that, I was about maybe 175 pounds body weight in January, and I could squat about my body weight for one rep. And by the end of March, I was squatting 315. So my
Woo!
strength just through the roof, and I had no idea that I possessed that. But I was doing it 3 times a week. I had really good competitive people around me, and
So,
at the same
so
time too.
just for
Go ahead,
anyone
sorry.
listening, then, say someone's looking to improve their strength, and there maybe was just first off, was that kind of maybe a weakness of like that you had before was general strength,
I wouldn't
or
I
were you
wouldn't say
already kind of like average?
I was I'd say I was pretty average. I mean, I was
Okay.
a really feisty competitor, if you will. Like I
Yeah.
always had a big fight in me, but
Yeah.
it was something that until I saw those improvements in my strength, it really dawned on me at that point that that was something that I had like never considered as a high school rower, like actually being on a good strength and conditioning program, and
Okay.
the
What was it that
improvements.
you did that helped that apart from obviously some people out there won't have access to a strength coach. So could you think of anything that you did that gave you those huge improvements, apart from being feisty, of course?
Well, I had all my goals written down from the time I was a kid. If I had goals for anything, it was like posted on the back of my bedroom door, and one of them was like get strong AF. I'm pretty sure, and just like
Nice and
and
specific.
anything specific. I mean, I think I just wanted to bend and send. I guess
Bend
is
and
is
send.
is,
Yeah,
is the
very scientific. I
expression.
can tell, yeah, you're a numbers guy for sure, definitely.
Mhm, mhm. I didn't. It wasn't. I think at that point I realized I could probably be a decent competitor, and like my 2K, because I pulled like an entry 2K when we started this S&C program. I basically pulled my PB from high school, which was 6:35, and by the end of March I was down to 6:18, and I was faster than everybody sort of at the university that rode out of Leander, and I was the second fastest in the whole club behind the club captain. And so at that point, I was like, okay, maybe I could like take this somewhere if I've got some good guidance. But I'd say for anyone who hasn't the resources to get a coach to like that they can pay or have come in, watch video. If you're a visual learner,
Yeah.
watch how you do it.
Wait,
Practice it with live weights.
what's some good the hook grip on Instagram, they're really good. Weightlifting House is really good. Any other ones that you watched that helped if you can remember? I know it's a long time ago.
Oh man, um,
There's plenty of stuff out there, I guess. You just go and watch the Olympic
there's a
weightlifting.
lot. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. I really like watching powerlifters because I always found that just in terms of strength, rowers, especially in like certain weight categories, were almost as strong as powerlifters. Obviously, not like the super heavyweights who are squatting like 900 pounds. I'm yet to meet a rower who's squatting like over 500 plus pounds. I'm
Oof.
sure
Sam
we'll make
Sam
sense.
Mayer is he was in our group in Cav. He was 5'10", but made up for it with his back. I think he could squat 180 or 190 for like 8 reps. He must have
For
been
like 450 pounds. That's
yeah.
insane.
Yeah, he was strong.
A cannonball. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
he was. Yeah, he was a cannonball. But yeah, okay, okay. So the weightlifting started to help. Then you pulled a 618, and then you got a bit curious.
Definitely got curious. And at that point I was then starting to look at what races could I go to try and build a little bit of a resume for myself, if you will. And it ended up leading me down a course where I ended up moving to the East Coast and training in New Brunswick for a year with a really good accredited coach. Um, and he helped me get onto the national team. And every goal that I set for that year that I was out there, we hit every single target almost exactly like to the day when we said we were going to do it. Um, and that really helped me when I eventually made the national team because I had basically a year and a half of full time training, uh, basically self-funded before I actually got to the training center. And that really helped me get through those initial few years that I was on the team.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Nice. So a lot of the training done on yourself then, like kind of, is that right?
Yeah, so what led me moving out east was I had obviously had all these big improvements and I was really excited by that and having basically the prospect of being able to go and do something with it. So in Canada, every 4 years, they have essentially an under 21 Olympic Games that they hold, and it's called the Canada Summer Games, and they have a winter one as well too. And in I guess this would have been April of 2012, so 12 years ago. Um, I go to my head coach at the club and I say, look, I'm the second fastest guy at the club. I've improved this much. I know that I still have a lot of improving to do, but I think with some good guidance, I could make Team Ontario
Mm.
for Canada Summer Games next summer. What do you think about that? And he just like kind of hums and haws for a sec and looks at me and he goes, "Your 2K is not fast enough. You don't sweep very well, and you don't know how to scull." and they turned around and walked away.
Wow.
And I was so, Jack, I was so upset by it. Like for 3 days, I was just so ticked off that he said that, because it just dismissed everything that a coach is supposed to do. If you have an
Yeah.
athlete that comes to you and is
Yeah,
like,
100%.
it
That
really frustrated me.
that's one thing I was going to say actually is that one piece of advice I normally give to people when they ask me is like they want to go and make a national team or they want to do this, this and that. Um Going out and speaking to maybe members of your club or other clubs and just telling them your ambitions and that you're serious and you want to take it to the next level. And yeah, unfortunately in your situation it was a bit of a disappointment, but you kind of have to take that leap of faith, and it has to be led by you as well, especially if you're younger.
100%.
If you show the initiative, people are always, well, I guess maybe not always, but often are very keen to help. So yeah, if it was me, I would be kind of happy that someone doubted me, because there's no better fuel than when someone doubts that you can do something or is dismissive. But yeah, anyways, okay, how did you respond to that?
Well, after 3 days, I decided that I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what sort of crap I've got to put myself through in order to do it. I'm going to make that team come hell or high water. And that was like a promise that I made to myself. And um, the day after I sort of had that conversation with myself, um, our club captain, who I mentioned earlier in our conversation, his twin brother had moved out to New Brunswick and was now the head of rowing New Brunswick. And I told him this story, and he said to me, "Look, if you live here for 9 months of the year, you'll technically have New Brunswick residency, and you clearly have the determination and everything that you want to do to want to go and pursue this goal. If you come and you live out here, I will train you. We'll go to Canada Summer Games, except instead of for Team Ontario, it would be for Team New Brunswick, and I'll help you get onto the national team." And
Yeah.
I said, "Done." Yeah, it was one of the easiest decisions I made. And I went and asked my parents, I'm like, could I defer a year of school and go and do this? I really think that I could accomplish something with it. And they said, yeah. So having really supportive parents
Yeah.
really helped with that, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be anywhere without, like, yeah, my dad or Pauline as well. So yeah, I can understand that. Um what was it that where did this drive, where did this like conviction come from that you had this ability to take that, yeah, I guess risk? Okay, maybe worst case scenario, you go back to college or you go move back in at home, but it is still a risk, you know. Where did that conviction come from? Do you think?
I'd consider myself a very calculated risk taker, and somebody who, if I make a decision on something very quickly, um, in my mind, it just means that I've had all the dots and all the pieces just like finally connect and
Yeah,
come together. So,
cool.
so some people would think that that might be a little impulsive, but I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about it. When it takes me, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to make a decision on something, it's because I haven't thought about all those other variables to just be able to bring
Yeah.
it together.
I know
But
what you
I
mean.
will.
I think that's a good way of describing it actually, because for me, for example, like when I've like hired business coaches and stuff like that, I've been super apprehensive about some of them, and then we'll gather as much information as possible. But then just sort of when you get that gut feeling, I think it was for me anyways, and you just know, and it's like now it's just something like you're just like it kind of kicks into gear, I guess. I guess,
Mhm.
yeah, I never that's interesting to hear it put like that, where it just all aligns. But
I'd
okay.
say I'd say the conviction from it though was I'm never one to back down from a challenge, and that to me was like the next biggest challenge that I could take on was like, okay, I'm first it was like I was one of the fastest in my high school, then I was one of the fastest in my club. Then I wanted to, like progress incrementally where it's like best in the province, best in the country, and then hopefully one day see if that could turn into like being among one of the best in the world at some point. And I knew that that was the thing that I needed in order to do it, and I just wasn't getting um, the quality like coaching experience at Leander at the time. there are good coaches there, but
Hmm.
the direction that the club was going at the time was not something that I felt was suited to my goals and my needs.
They
So I
screwed
knew I
that
had.
one up. I mean, the guy wasn't even that. You maybe could have been a good coach, but I guess just saw no potential in you. Sorry, I don't want to throw this guy under the bus, but I guess that's
Well,
bad coaching. Is if you don't give people a chance, that's bad coaching as well. But
what's so funny? I mean, fast forward to August of 2013. I only started sculling for the first time after sweeping for basically 5 years, all through high school and the year afterwards. Um, Having never been in a sculling boat from like July of 2012. Fast forward to August of 2013. I have a bronze medal in the men's eight with Team New Brunswick. So you're going up against British Columbia and Ontario, two powerhouses. Like the population of New Brunswick was the population of my hometown in Hamilton. So
yeah.
very, very small pool of athletes to come from. I have a silver medal in the men's double with a guy that I'd rode with 7 times, and I won the single while I was there. So that to me was
Did you
um,
get, please, okay, we can cut this out if you don't want to say it, but did you at least get to go up to that old coach and be like, hey, with all your medals around
well,
your neck?
when I
That's what
when
I
I
would have
came
done.
home. Yeah, well, when I came home in August of 2013, I've never been one to rub things like that in people's faces, but the club very generously had like a welcome home, congratulations get together for me. And he came up to me and he's like, I always knew there was something special about you, this, that,
Bullshit.
and I just smiled and shook his hand and I said thanks without telling him like, actually no, the reason why I drove myself literally insane to do this was because you told me I couldn't. And so
I love that
it,
shit.
it was only actually a couple years ago I figured out like what was it that he said that made me so upset. And I think part of it was that he just basically dismissed me and that there was no other conversation at that. But the second was because there was an element of truth to it. It was
Okay.
true. I wasn't that strong on my 2K. I mean, 618 is a pretty good score, but
Yeah.
if he was looking at it from the perspective of you've got to be good enough to win, that's not good enough. I didn't have the small boat experience at the time. Like I spent the rest of that summer rowing and racing in a pair, and that really helped my development. And I didn't have the fine technical skills to be able to move a small boat like a single, and I didn't know how to scull. And my ability to be a good sweeper 100% came from all the technical stuff that I learned as a sculler, and it
Okay.
just completely propelled my whole career forward. So
So that's really
so I think
interesting.
that's
Again,
why
just for the listener to take that example where one, you use someone being dismissive of you as maybe a part of like prove them wrong, like fuel, but then you also had the humility to like accept that perhaps some of that stuff could be true. So I guess that's kind of something that's pretty important as an athlete and just as a person in general is to actually be able to take a step back from your ego and like honestly look at yourself and like what do you need to improve on. So that was it's an interesting balance um that you had there, which I think should people at home should take home. Okay, so Kit, welcome back to the club or wherever you are now. So um what was the
back in
next steps?
Ontario at this point.
Okay,
Yeah, back in Ontario at this point. So
back at
so then
school.
after no, I didn't go back to school at that point because I wasn't I knew I was going to come back from New Brunswick around August, but at that point I had such a great time with it that I was like, okay, well I'll take another year off and I'll just work and I'll just
Yeah.
sort of make some money back, having gone into the red a little bit while
Yeah.
I was out. So I did that. Worked a great blue collar job with a bunch of welders at a factory. That was a lot of fun,
Welding is a
and
skill I actually want to learn.
it's a lot of fun,
Can you
and it's
weld?
something.
Could you like weld at home? Could you?
I should have prefaced that a bit better. The the factory that I worked at made and produced ladders, and like those big ladders that you can like wheel around, where they've got like
Nice.
that mechanism on the bottom where you stamp on it and it locks it onto the ground.
That was
Um,
you.
well, they
That
had
was
welders
all
there.
you.
Yeah, they had welders there. They had metal bending machines there, and my job essentially was to assemble and disassemble them to get them ready for shipment or to get them ready to be painted. And it was great because it was like a 5-minute drive from the club. Um, and I worked 7 o'clock to 2 in the afternoon. So I had like all afternoon to train. So that schedule worked really well for me when I came back home, and it gave me time. Like it was one of those jobs where there wasn't a lot of brain power that went into it. It was quite
Yeah.
physical. So I had a lot of um,
It's good for the
some people would call it daydreaming, but it was a good time for me to like visualize what I wanted to do.
hmm.
Um, so that really helped at that
Okay.
point. And
So what were you visualizing?
well, at that point, I came back from New Brunswick, so I went out with like 618. I came back with like 611 on my 2K, but it improved in like every other area. So my 2K at that point was irrelevant because I was going fairly fast in the small
Yeah.
boats, and at that point I was targeting some head races in the fall. There was two that I competed in, and then of course our national championships are in November, or were in November at that time. So I was targeting to like do those head races as sort of progression pieces, sort of like transition from 2K racing to like 5K racing and such, um, and then of course go to nationals and actually try to like get on the podium for like the under 23 single. So those were my goals for that fall.
Okay. And then and moving into those, then you started to get close then, I guess. Like,
Definitely. Like I had a really successful run while I was living out east. I think in the single alone, I think I won something like 19 or 20 races before I went to Canada Summer Games. And then the first head race that I did that fall, which was my first ever one in the single, I won that, and I beat a whole bunch of guys who had gone and like won Canadian Henley or had gone to like World University Games and stuff. So I'm like, okay, there's actually like good people that maybe didn't necessarily compete at Canada Summer Games that now I'm competing against at this level. Um, but then I went and raced Head of the Charles in the fall of 2013, and I won that like kind of unexpectedly. I went down to do well and to win, but winning the club single as a 20-year-old was very special to me. That was because I had no idea. In a head race, you have no idea if you win. So um, it's funny. I got back to the dock, and my dad grabbed me, and he's like, how'd the race go? And I was like, oh, it was terrible. I don't even think I made the top five. And I go into the boathouse, and one of my friends from New Brunswick, and her coach was there, and asked me how I did, and I said, I didn't really race that well. And he pulls out his iPad, and he's going through it, and he's like, oh, you won, like by a pretty decent margin. And I was like,
oh yeah.
yeah. So I remember running down the stairs into the parking lot and just like shouting to my dad that I won, and like jumped in his arms. And then, but it was unofficial at that point because they
Oh,
still had to
risky.
calculate if anybody had like started late or had any
Steering.
like course
Yeah.
violations. So it was like a pretty nerve-wracking 4 hours. But then by the time they called me up on stage, I knew at that point it was like definitive for sure. And so that gave me a lot of um, confidence going into nationals, which was like 3 weeks after that. And ended up at one point um, having the fastest time of the whole regatta. And like the regatta ended up being cut short because of bad weather. Um, but I'd raced guys who had just come back from the Senior World Championships in South Korea at that point, and was
Mm.
beating them in quarterfinals, and I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And that
What
definitely
time
got
did you do?
that race in particular probably like low 7 minutes, something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Uh, for like being later, a little bit later in the season, like
Yeah. The winter in
wouldn't have
Canada.
been
Yeah.
wouldn't have been peak time. I mean, we were basically racing in like 4 or 5 degree
Yeah.
uh
Sludge.
and windy and cold, um and not on a course that's known for being notoriously fast as well. So yeah, so like that time of year I was pretty happy with the time,
hmm.
especially because it seemed that what I had achieved in the summer in terms of speed I was now able to carry into the fall, which was really great for me because it's like, okay, well, I'd say that racing in cold water versus rowing in like a warm, deep lake and being able to go about the same speed as you could in the summer when you're at your peak, to me was a pretty good indication that I was like still improving regardless of the time.
Yeah. Okay.
And I ended
Um,
up, I think I ended up coming third in the under 23 nationals at that point, and then I got the official invite to move out west to Victoria.
okay. So you got invited in as an under 23. Like how did the Canadian system work then at the time? Or I guess it was post Olympics, so they normally try and bring on a few more people. Um, like were you kind of like what ranking was that overall? You said third under 23,
I was seventh overall by
seventh
like
overall. Mm.
5 or 6 seconds, I think is the
Was
way it
that
worked.
like your first attempt at like the was that your first senior nationals? Or is it your
Yeah.
kind of first? Wow, okay, wow. Good first
Well,
impression.
actually, that's not true. I raced nationals in the fall of 2012, and at that point, I'd only been sculling for a couple of months, and I think I won the D final there. So the comparison from like 2012 nationals to 2013 nationals was like, I was nobody at the 2012 nationals, and then actually came in with like a bit of a name and a racing reputation.
Yeah,
But but having gone a second time and also actually competing against people who had like gone to the London Olympics or had like
yeah.
just competed at the World Championships was really cool.
What
I
was the
mentioned,
what was the big difference, do you think, in your rowing, maybe like your training or your technique or your mindset between those two national races that got you to seventh overall and selected for a Canadian team?
well, my confidence grew for sure because at that point I just had enough experience doing well in races that it sort of became, I don't want to say, maybe habitual is the right word. Like I learned what it took to win.
Yeah.
Um,
What did it take to win?
it took everything. It took absolutely everything. Uh, I mean, a bit of an anecdotal story for that is there was a man who went and saw a violin player at a concert and played the most beautiful violin that they'd ever heard. And they go up to them afterward and they say, "Wow, that was the most incredible piece of playing that I've ever heard in my entire life. I wish that I would give anything to be able to play like that." And the violin player turns to the man and he says, "I did." And that was my mentality towards it was I was never going to leave a stone unturned.
Hmm.
And even just like talking about what you said earlier about my height, I was always told that I was too small to be able to compete. Like I'm 6'2" now, and at the time I was probably like 180 or 183 pounds, like pretty light, like 82, 83 kilograms.
Mm.
Um, but
It's
uh,
ridiculous the amount of like good, scullers that there have been in the GB system anyways that were like competitive winning trials, but they're same sort of like 6 foot, 5'11", 6'2", 80 kilos. And like at least in the UK system, it's just nah, you're never gonna make it, which is such a shame. It's such bullshit. But anyways, yeah, sorry. You're
it's
giving
the
everything.
fight. Yeah, it's the fight in the athlete, absolutely. And I think I would pick an athlete now as a coach who at least had the willingness and the desire to go to those places that it takes to be able to push yourself and produce those kinds of results than somebody who has quote unquote potential. Because one reason I
Yeah,
was
such
never picked to scout as a junior was because I wasn't tall enough. It's like, well, so and so is 6'5" or 6'6", and they have more potential than you. And I'm like, okay, I'll just dust them in seat racing, and I would do that. And they're like, oh well, this, that, and the other, and their family's paying $50 for them to go and use a club single, and I'm like, I could do that. I got my own job. I could pay for these things. So I think maybe in the beginning it was a bit of a chip on my shoulder, which like thankfully healed about my height. Um, but I think the biggest thing was I turned what I perceived and others perceived as weaknesses or disadvantages into my greatest advantages. Like if I'm as light as I am, I can get the boat up to speed faster off the start. If I'm really strong and my 2K is really fast, I've got greater power to weight ratio. Um, I'm 188 centimeters tall and my wingspan is 201 centimeters. Like I've got monkey arms, so
yeah.
I can row long too. And I'm quite compact. Like I've got really long legs, really long arms, and a short torso. So I could fit into a crew very well with guys that are much taller than me. And
Yeah. That's like the
and
opposite
like,
of me. I've got short legs. I'm a similar height, 6'1". I've got short legs, a long back, but most of my height comes from my neck and my face. So if you actually compare my shoulders with someone else's, I'm like 5'9" basically, but I've just got this mad long face, which is good for nothing. It's good for no sports, which makes it difficult for me to row with people. But I found a way. But anyway, okay, right. So yeah, chip in your shoulder.
yeah, and I think just after I had sort of developed some really good habits around racing, like visualizing beforehand. Also, like I did a lot of in 2013 alone. I think I was watching an average of about 3 hours of rowing races a day. Like I
Yeah,
would sit with a stopwatch, a piece of paper, and I would write down
me
what are
too.
they doing, how are
Did
they
you
doing
used to
it.
type rowing into YouTube? Ever?
Yeah, and of
Yeah,
course I would go on the World Rowing video archive that they have, and would watch
yeah.
races all back to '91.
I used to do
And
that as well. I wouldn't watch that far, but I would watch there are certainly some ones that I would watch a lot of, but what any particular favorite races you like to watch, or maybe races that people, listening could go and watch that you found valuable?
oh my gosh. Um, Well, I one crew I always gravitated towards was Steve Redgrave and Matthew Pinson in the
Oh,
pair.
really?
Like, yeah, I read Matthew Pinson's book,
Great
A
book.
Lifetime of Race, in 2012, cover to cover, like 10 times.
It's a great, yeah,
That
I've
is
read it a couple times. Great book. Highly recommend it. I'll link it in the bio if I can be asked.
awesome, and it was what I saw as what I could expect in the future, because it sort of laid out like his own journey, and I love the way that he rode. He was so dynamic, and for a guy that was accused even by someone like Steve for being a little bit lazy. I mean,
Yeah.
from '91 to '03 being unbeaten at a world championships, that is pretty impressive. And and I met him at Head of the Charles in 2012, and he spent 10 minutes talking to me and was the nicest guy. I was so impressed. People say never meet your heroes, but he like completely exceeded my expectations. He was such a gentleman. He asked me so many questions, and he was just
Wow.
invested in this conversation. He wasn't like half turned away or like
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
around
yeah,
to see.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I really like that. And
I had
so,
one interaction with Matthew Pinson. They were filming a clip, and I was trying to walk through the door at Henley, and I was like, "Oh, oh!" I backed off, and he was like, "No, no, on you go, on you go." And I got really nice vibes off him. But that's the only interaction. He didn't give me the time of day. No, and I didn't ask him anything. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I've heard he's quite nice. But okay, so you liked his races then? Yeah, that's one thing I think. I used to do that as well. And technically, I was told that I progressed I was told I was natural at it. Like, I was just had a knack for it. But behind that, I was spent so much time just watching footage and just looking at one thing I love to do with the races was like in the first 100, 200 meters, like look at all the crews and say, just try and place my bets on which one's gonna move away just by how efficiently they're moving the boat. And you can tell the ones that are ragging it up and down, and you can tell the ones that are like really clean and efficient. And then furthermore, what is it they're doing that's allowing them to move away? That's what I love to do. But anyways, okay, yeah. Um, is that
I,
was that how you
I
approached it?
definitely, and even to the point where I would I'd look at okay, so just going back to like the early '90s, for example, the Canadian women's rowing team at that point was an absolute juggernaut. Like they were trailblazers. Like they won the women's four, the women's pair, the women's eight, and the women's single at the 1991 World Championships.
Wow.
Like a, a clean sweep, and and then they went to the Olympic Games, bronze in the women's single, gold in the women's eight, gold in the women's four, gold in the women's pair, and so a lot of it was like, well, what are they doing?
Hmm.
Like there was so much
That wasn't Spracklin, was
information.
it? Was that Spracklin coaching them? No. Or was it?
Well, I think it would have been Al Morrow. at some point. But I know Mike Spracklin was coaching Silken Lawman, who was the Canadian women's singles scholar at the time.
Okay.
And Spracklin, of course, was coaching the men at the time, and they
Right.
won the 8 in 1992 as well.
Right. Then
So mentally,
Derek.
Canadian.
Yeah, there was a good team there. I remember I used to watch that Derek Porter guy as well.
Derek Porter stroked the 8 in 1992 that won,
Yeah.
and Terry Paul, who ended up being my coach later on, was the coxswain for that crew.
Oh, cool. Cool. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so right behind all the visualization, then that, yeah, I think it's so powerful. Is there anything else? I love visualization. I think it's so powerful. Would you mainly do it through technical stuff, or would you do any other visualizations, visualization work for like races or anything?
definitely. So when I was living out east, twice a week I would go to lift weights, and it was about a 30-minute walk there. And I would go and walk by myself and listen to music, and I would visualize how I wanted my race at that time in the single to go, because I really wanted to win that race. And I would go through every single possible scenario in my head of if something goes wrong, how can I turn it around? So, and I would just do it by posing a question to myself, like, what if I have the fastest start I've ever done in the single? It's clean, it's sharp, it hasn't cost me a lot of energy, and I'm in last place.
Mm.
How do I turn that around? How do I come back from that mentally or physically? Um, what do I do if I'm leading the race at halfway by half a length and I'm starting to fade? How do I turn that around? Um, what do I do if I'm having a great race and I'm down at halfway by 2 lengths?
What would you do?
What do I do?
Like, yeah, like
Well, well,
literally, what would
well,
you?
well, here's the thing. In my head, I would think about, like, okay, well, mentally, here's what I have to do. I have to dig in, or I have to say, okay, well, at that point, it's like damage control. So I always had a rule: 500 meters into any race, no matter what's happening, don't change your race plan. Like, it's the opening like two moves on a chessboard. You're not gonna
Yeah.
be like, okay, well, now I've got to do this or now I've got to do that. Like, just being really stuck into like the first part of the race. Like, let the race unfold. I've been
There's
in
so much
plenty of
time.
races where people shot out. Yeah, where people have shot out in the first 500 meters, and then they end up in last place at the finish line, because it doesn't matter how fast you start; it's about where you finish at the end of the race. So part of that was also like getting to trust my own planning and process for it too. Um, but on top of that, going through all those scenarios, I would practice those in training. So we would do a workout like 10 sets of 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off at race pace, and I would have that conversation with my coach beforehand, um, like the last two pieces, I'm down 10 feet on a guy that I need to beat, and he would be screaming that through the megaphone to me. So I would practice all those
Mm.
situations in training, so that when if I ever encounter them in racing,
Yeah.
it was practice. It's like I
Yeah.
practiced, being
Yeah.
down, or I practiced being up and fading, or practice, being able to go right to the line too.
So powerful.
So
You're just building, and
and
the good thing about it is it's a controlled environment as well, and
definitely.
you can always imagine the positive outcome. Um,
And just like the neural pathways it creates in your brain, like thinking about it is the
yeah,
same as doing it.
yeah.
And,
Literally, I use
and
that example all the time of like I can't remember what it was, but it's the person throwing the ball with the brain scan and the bits of their brain light up, and it's a person imagining throwing a ball. And as far as the brain
same thing.
scan's concerned, it's the same thing. Um, so yeah, it's so powerful.
I would do a race every year about 10,000 times in my head. So then even when I would show up and I would have the nerves of having to compete, um, like I always try to have my nerves make me a lion, and
Okay.
recognize, like, it's good that I'm nervous. It means that I care about it. It also means that I'm in a very heightened state of awareness. So um, thinking about doing things, I was never afraid of failing. Um, I was never nervous about failing. I think I was nervous about, well, I guess failing, like not being able to deliver what I had put so much work into, um,
Okay, yeah.
and
So
and
letting
that
is that
that
letting
gave me.
yourself down?
Well, I recognized, even if I was like a sculler by myself, that it was more than just me that was rowing it. I always, whenever I race the single, I always looked at it as, I've got more people in my boat supporting me
Yeah.
than you do. So I've got more people cheering me on than you do. And I would try to take reasons like, I've had to sacrifice more. I've had to, like the things I've missed in rowing, like I've missed weddings, I've missed births, I've missed funerals, I've missed
Yeah.
graduations. Like it's just list is endless. And so you can kind of take some of those things and turn it into fuel as a way to process it. In maybe not the most healthy of ways, but it's good to be able to take what some would consider a disadvantage or like an unfortunate circumstance and be able to turn it around and use it as no, this is actually the reason why I'm going to be able to push a little bit harder.
This is so I'm loving hearing this. I think everybody just needs to recognize like the value here of this mindset approach, like and none of it is to do with what club you have access to or your height or whatever it is, your current 2K score. It's all something you can do right now. So no, I'm loving hearing this. Um okay, so let's move in now to you getting into, and if you feel like there's any other areas that that separated you from other people, like please do bring them up, like now or further into the conversation. But going into the Team Canada then, so how did you find that move out back to Victoria? Is that where you, yeah, I think that's Shawnigan Lake, isn't it?
Elk Lake at the
Elk
time.
Lake, Elk
Yeah.
Lake. Where
Yeah.
is Shawnigan?
But
I'm making that up from. Anyway, sorry.
Shawnigan's a little bit further north. No, it's okay.
Okay.
No, no. You're technically not wrong. So our home base at the time was on Elk Lake in Victoria. But quite oftentimes we would go up to Shawnigan Lake to get some longer rowing pieces in because Elk Lake
Right.
is like maybe like 2 kilometers long and 2 kilometers across almost. And then
Hmm.
you had another smaller lake called Beaver Lake that you go and row down into. But Shawnigan Lake is about 7 kilometers long. So you could go and do like 2 laps of that lake and you get in like a pretty decent rowing
Nice.
session. So they'd go up there a few times. Well, I was a very small fish in a very big pond. I was 20 years old. One of the youngest to make the team at that age, and it was a real like culture shock to me because in 2012 Canada won a silver medal in the men's eight, and there were a whole bunch of guys that had continued on after that. So getting to be around guys like Will Crothers and uh, Rob Gibson and Conlon McCabe, who had all gone and done that, was like, wow, that to me was really cool because at that point it was like I've earned my right to be here,
Yeah.
and that helped ease the transition a little bit. Some guys were really helpful in the first few months that I was out there, just getting used to everything. Were always giving me good advice, like an arm around the
Yeah.
shoulder, like
Until you started
Rob.
beating them.
Some of them I didn't though. I mean,
uh,
um, but like uh, Rob Gibson and Will Crothers, like if like when those guys would go to Europe, like Rob would lend me his car to use for a few months while he was over racing at the World Cups.
nice. You
Um,
went out and did donuts in it. Went
yeah, yeah, but don't tell
yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember when I first like it was a bit embarrassing actually when I first got into the Caversham training center, and this is embarrassing if he's listening to it, but John Collins, who I'd known obviously like through following the team and stuff like that, he was a scholar. I know who he knew who he was for a time, and then I was going to this forest head with him because I was in the boat, and then I was saying to Polly, and I was like, I was like, "Oh, I'm in the car with John," and she was like, "Who's John?" And I was like, "Oh, John Collins," just like I call him
them.
John.
Yeah,
Know that it was
not
like I was like
name all the time. Yeah,
starstruck or anything, but it was just kind of cool seeing that someone who you maybe held up on a pedestal a bit. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, nice supportive group you're coming into. It sounds
there were definitely some. There was a whole mix of people there. So um, the way that the Canadian team worked at the time was they had um, what we would call the NDC or the National Development Center, and then you
okay.
had sort of the senior national team. So being a younger athlete, not hitting the erg standards necessarily, but like hitting all the on water standards. Um, I was in the NDC, and I guess the idea at the time behind it was because we're not quite at the level of the senior athletes, both in like national competition, international competition, and erg performance. You weren't going to do as much volume. That was a lie. We were doing the exact same amount of volume, and like that first month that I was there, um, the first 2 weeks we rode like 300 kilometers in a week, and I was
Wow.
fried, fried. Yeah,
300.
but it was
Was that
all
some
it was.
sort of like, this is me being a bit cynical perhaps, but was that maybe like a funding thing or something, like so they could justify maybe like slightly less or something? So because I know sometimes they'll change it or
No, so basically the criteria. So I'm not entirely familiar about how the lottery system in the UK works, but in Canada we have the it's called the AAP. I can't remember exactly what it stands for. It'll come to me, but essentially you have a certain amount of criteria that you have to hit, and it's tiered. So you've
yeah,
got like
okay.
your D card or your development card that you get, and then you have your C card, and then you have your SR or your senior card, and then you have your SR1, SR2 card above that. So, and so it all depends on what you're able to hit. So, of those
Mm,
three criteria that I mentioned, you have ERG performance, performance at nationals, and international performances. If you do two of those really well, you can get funding. So for myself, like if I did very well at nationals and I hit like the under 23 ERG standard, I would be able to get a development card. Um, the other one internationally was like if you're an under 23, if you come top three at under 23s, you can get that as well. And then if you're a senior, if you come top eight and top half in a particular event, then you would get senior carding. So,
hmm.
so it's tiered a little bit differently, and the amount of money that you would get, of course, would go up. And we had all kinds of like performance bonuses. So if you're a senior athlete at the World Championships, you get, if you won a medal, you get an extra certain amount a month. If you came like top four, top five at a World Championships, you would get an extra like few $1,000s. And then we also
Nice.
had other
That's what it's all
organizations that,
about, isn't it? The money.
yeah,
That's why we
yeah,
get
that's
into this sport.
exactly, yeah. Turn out like Lewis Hamilton or something like
Yeah,
that. Just
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Cristiano Ronaldo. Um,
yeah.
yeah, sounds similar to the GB system. The way it worked in GB, it sounds, yeah, like I think if you're kind of good under 23, you'd get £500 a month. If you were decent like development, like about to get into the GB team, like near on, just about to get selected, it would be like 1,000. And then kind of the minimum you could be in the GB team was 1,500 a month, and then that goes all the way up to like 2,800 or something like that. Yeah,
2,800 pounds a month.
£2,800 per month on the top.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a like yeah, yeah, obviously, I don't know what the terms are in Canada, so don't feel free. You obviously don't have to share this stuff, but I want to share the British system a bit because I think it's so important for people to know that going into it. And people, yeah, they don't like to, for some reason, they don't like to tell athletes coming in what the system is, but yeah, it's all tax free as well. It's counted as a grant. So if you're on the A band, which
Yes.
is it's really hard to get onto that A band, 2.8K per month.
Right.
It's a pretty good wage, and yeah, I was on the 1,500 a month one, um, which
It's
I
pretty
mean
good.
that was a huge privilege. I was getting paid to do a sport. I friggin' loved it, but in that part of the UK, it was quite expensive, like paycheck to paycheck for sure. Did lots of yeah, found lots of ways to save a buck. I was selling all the kit that GB had. The spare kit that they gave me, I was selling it on Facebook Marketplace. But then I got snitched on
Oh, that's
by
not
one of the
cool.
other rowers. I'm pretty sure I know who it was.
Oh,
I won't name him, but you know who you are.
okay.
But anyways,
Decent
sorry,
to
friggin' total tangent, man.
it was we had various other like ours was tax free as well too, but we had various other like we would get access to physio right away. We had a team doctor we could see right away if we needed anything. So they provided a lot of those things for us. Like we didn't have to you know go on training camps and like whip out the checkbook, so to speak. Like we
Okay.
were covered in a lot of ways with a lot of things. I'm I think only just recently they've and I could be wrong, so I'm sorry if I get this wrong. I think now the winnings that they get for para athletes is now going to be equal to what the rest of Canadian athletes receive. So I think that that's like a pretty big
Yeah.
step forward.
We have that
I
in the
think
UK. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what's in the UK right now.
yeah, that's fantastic because we've had some really incredible athletes in Canada, especially para athletes too. So and it's so great seeing them be able to pursue something,
Hmm.
either having never had an opportunity to, or having an opportunity to do it again after something that could have prevented them from doing so. So anyway, um, yeah, the first few months that I was out there was really,
Eased in.
really intense, just with the volume. Yeah, like, uh,
So what did they
oh,
say? They said that you're going to be, so Taylor, you're coming in. We're going to build you in nice and easily. You know, you're just young. You're 20 years old.
I was a
300K.
baby.
What did you do when you saw 300K on the training program? Started
I said,
eating.
yeah. I think at that point, um, I was probably burning like 8,000 calories a day, and then having to put that back into my body. So I actually learned really quickly. You cannot do that in 3 meals a day. I
Mm.
was eating 6 times a day, so I'd eat before practice, eat immediately after first practice, would have a snack before like our second session at 11 o'clock, would eat after that, and then would get home from practice at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, would have something immediately when I got home, and then would eat a little bit later before I went to bed. And most of it was like, um, if you could blend it, then
You
that
can
was how it
send
went
it.
down. So like, exactly, yeah, I like that. If you can blend it, you can send it. Yeah. So like 2 or 3 of my meals a day was like smoothies and
Oh,
protein.
but like,
Just
please tell me it was like fruit. Like, please, I don't want to know if it
oh
was
yeah,
true.
oh yeah, no. It would be like whole milk, Greek yogurt, banana, strawberry, a scoop of peanut butter, and protein
Yeah,
powder, and like a
yeah,
liter of that, two or
yeah.
three times a day. Yeah. So
Oof. I would, because I was quite into like recovery and stuff like that. So I'd have my banana and blueberry smoothies after like training, but I'd have it in the winter and it would be like frozen blueberries. So I'd be so cold, I'd have to put on a jumper and go and sit in my
oh,
flat. And sometimes I was just like, I was sitting there freezing, drinking my whole smoothie. Like, what am I doing? Why don't I just have like, but anyways,
one thing that I really wasn't used to was rowing year round. You can't do that in Ontario
yeah.
or on the East Coast. So if it's -1 in Victoria, like the lake's not freezing. Uh, so you would
Yay. We can
yeah.
go out
So you
rowing
would
still.
yeah.
That's
um,
brutal.
yeah, but it was kind of nice to help. You could develop yourself now over the winter time, and you didn't have to sort of end the season on one note and then have to pick it up and take a certain amount of time in the spring to get used to it again.
Yeah.
But
Such,
I,
yeah.
I did kind of miss the fact that you could go and like train on your bike for like 3 months in the wintertime, just develop your aerobic system in
Yeah.
another way. Or you could go skiing, for example. I mean, we did go on bike camps, we did go on erg camps, to just like break up the monotony of the wintertime. And uh, it was a big adjustment for sure, especially being so young. But I understood, like, I was there for a reason. They were developing me to try and do well at under 23s, um, and so I had my goals like firmly fixed on that. And I really had the attitude of like, look, I'm not directly competing for, against like 95, 96, 97% of these guys here for under 23 seats. So every time I raced, I was like, I've got nothing to lose. I can just, if I come, middle of the pack, back of the pack, I'm gonna, it's still experience that I'm gaining that'll help when I go and race guys my own
Hmm.
age and a little bit younger than me.
So playing the
But
long-term game a little bit more,
definitely,
which
and
is so huge because I think in so many environments you're made to feel disposable, so you have to play the short term. Um,
yeah,
so it sounds good that you're in an environment where you could, yeah,
I
be a
was
bit more.
very, very, very fortunate to make it out there when I did. Um,
So just out of curiosity, then, if you're on the same training program, how are you approaching the training program in a way that was like, how are you able to influence the program in a way that was being a bit more like long term?
hmm.
Or could you
Well,
influence it?
influence it in the way of like, how is this going to help me with
Changing,
my
yeah, yeah, or changing, changing the sessions or something.
um you wouldn't. You would just you would just have to crack on and
Just go
get it done.
slower.
They were with the NDC at the time. Our coach was like fairly lenient if you felt like you were doing a lot, but um, more times than not, I would show up for like an afternoon tech session after I'd already rode 35 kilometers or something like that. And we're going out to do another 10 or 12 or 15 or something. And I would just be a zombie. And he's like, this is all a part of it. And so, what was really helpful for that for the rest of my career was getting used to the fact that you are going to be exhausted like 49 weeks out of 52 of the
Yeah.
entire year.
Anytime
And
I'd go hill walking with my friends, and I would always be like the last one up, and they'd be like, "I thought you were meant to be this super fit guy," and I'm like, "No, I'm fit. I'm very, 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 very fit for about
yeah,
3 days of the year."
yeah, yeah. And I looked at it the exact same way too. After I sort of realized that, I'm like, there's one day of the year that I put above any other day, and that's the final at the World Championships. I don't care about how I do at in terms of peaking. Like I couldn't really care how I would do at nationals, for example, because I already knew that if I was performing well in the erg and performing well at the World Championships, nationals was just another opportunity to get racing in. Uh, and like various other regattas. Like I actually found it a lot harder to race some of those smaller local regattas than it was to race like the bigger ones because for me it was just another rendezvous with practicing racing. It wasn't necessarily like something where it was like, oh, I have to do well here, unless it was like I know that I could win the under 23 single at nationals, or I know that I could win dueling over a grand in the single, which is a 1,000 meter race. You win $1,000 if you win it. So if if I was gearing up towards some of those races where it was like it's not really like my target for the year, then I really couldn't be. I would still race as fast as I could, but I wouldn't be like super hung up if I didn't do as well as I thought I could have, if that makes sense. So I really
Mhm.
picked and choose my battles in that first year just so that I could make it through that first year and not crash and burn. That was tough to do.
Mhm.
That was really tough to do. But my goal in 20 that would have been 2014 that I moved out there, was to like go to my first under 23s and to just see how that went.
Okay. Was that the year that you were in the stroke seat of the quad and I was stalking you online?
No, so that would have
Uh,
been 2015. So I raced the quad twice at under 23s. The first year that I went, um, was a really interesting story. So Canada had never sent um, a men's quad to under 23s before. So that was the first time that we did it. And um, in amongst the guys in that crew, I was the fastest sculler, which really made sense because I was the only one who was training full time. Everybody else was like still in school and on like their school's training program. And I was also the only guy in that quad that was under 6 minutes on their 2K. And and so I knew that I had like a really good build up to the year, and I knew that I had the makings, or I was in the process of being able to turn that into something that could be successful on the world stage. And we went to those 2014 World Championships thinking that we could come away with a medal, and we got smoked, like absolutely pumped in our semifinal. We lost to a Dutch crew by like this much. There were four boats in a line, and we were just on the wrong side. And I left that championships thinking, how do I improve when I'm already at my best?
mm.
Like it was a very very strange
You felt
situation
like
to
there
be in.
wasn't anything you could have been doing better.
At the time, no.
Yeah.
And
Do you feel like you're, I mean, not, yeah. Did you feel like your technique was perfect? It's okay
I
to
think that,
say it.
yeah, yeah. Well, honestly, I mean, um, I think I look at that experience as being the most necessary, humbling experience in my entire life because a month later, I wake up in the middle of the night and I just sort of have this revelation of like, I didn't do everything I could have. I bargained with
Okay.
myself what sessions I wanted to do well on. I only pushed myself to the point to be like, I'm doing just what is necessary to win, not what it, or sorry, I was only pushing myself to the point to do what I thought was enough to win, not what was necessary to win. So um, if I'm going to win a race and it's like, I only need to be ahead by, a deck or half a length to win, rather than being like, no, I'm going to try and make the boat go as fast as I can every time I go to the start line. Um, that changed me. And going through that whole process of realizing, like, you know what, even on my best day I wasn't good enough, and I realized that there were so many things in my training that I could have tweaked in order to improve that. Like, if we had 2 sessions a week where we were doing race pieces, I would just spend like the rest of the week just like recovering or paddling around the lake, just waiting to like pounce on those days, rather than actually being like, I've got 2 hours in between sessions. That's plenty of time to recover and get your core temperature down and hydrate
Wow.
and get enough food in you.
Okay,
So
so yeah, again, it's like something that so many people would view as a setback, and they would look at it and go, well, there's everything I did. Maybe tell themselves what they wanted to hear, which is, I did everything I could. Maybe, this isn't for me. When again, it's like you're
or blame it
saying,
on
like,
someone else. Yeah,
yeah.
blame it on a teammate, blame it on a coach. And for me, that was the easy way out. Like, I wanted to be faced with um, it can be a really brutal sport sometimes, and you've got to like be willing to face up to like some of those hard facts. And the hard fact for me was, um, I failed because I allowed myself to fail by thinking that I had done enough. And I made sure that when I went back to under 23s in 2015, when that guy from the UK was like creeping me out, trying to see what this show was all about, that if I lost with my teammates to anybody, they were better athletes than us. They did everything that we did perfectly, but just a little bit better.
Hmm.
And I would have been able to have taken that on the chin and said, okay, I
Yeah,
lost the crew. I did everything I could have
100%.
perfectly, barring illness, injury, equipment failure, like all those things. Like they outdid us. And so
Yeah, you'll be
my
sorted. It's
whole,
yeah.
yeah, my whole mentality for the year completely changed. I had a little saying I said to myself, which was, if you're still breathing, keep going. Because I was like, like every
Medical
time.
disclaimer before anybody goes out and pushes it. Make sure that you're
Yes,
medical, like
yes,
you're
we are not medical professionals.
yeah, if
Yeah,
that wasn't obvious.
yeah.
But yeah,
Even though
okay.
like even though we ignore all the warning signs on equipment, like if you feel dizzy or lightheaded, like please stop. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that means I'm almost there.
It means yeah, it means speed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, I think I'm loving hearing about this. I think it's so cool. People should be listening, taking notes right now.
and it just completely changed my mentality towards how I approached
What do
racing.
you just to stop you there, like what do you think is it about your minds? I just think that's quite rare that people can go into those situations and make a change coming back from it. Like, do you have any insight? Again, you said it could be innate, or is it something you're conscious of in your thought process towards something that allowed you to look at your training properly?
I think one of the biggest things was the fact that there was a definitive end date to it. Like, I could always go and compete at a world championships after that under 23s, but I could never do under 23s again. And at that point, I'd read enough research that, having success at the junior level or the under 23 level translates well to racing as a senior for a few reasons. One of them being, if you race in a particular boat class your whole career, like a quad, for example, you graduate with all those other people out of under 23s and you get to race them later on. So you know them and you also know the event. So I really looked at it as like, um, you know, it's good to learn how to win at the, starting at the lowest level. Like, it's good to, if you're like just starting out, if you're having a really bad day, it's good to like not put your handle down, or it's not good to cut a session short.
Hmm.
It's good to sort of pick what you need to do. Like, because after that, I basically just went hunting every time I was at practice. It's like, who's the next person faster than me that I need to beat on the senior team? And I had some really great teammates who gave me a lot of encouragement and advice, whether it was other under 23 athletes, or senior athletes too. But I also think too, in 2014, our under 23 team broke a 7-year medal drought, and we won 3 medals there. We won a bronze in the women's four, we won a bronze in the lightweight men's pair, and we won a gold in the coxed four. And those guys in the coxed four were on the same training program as me, on the same lake, training every day, right beside each other, and they won, and we came seventh. And I was like, okay, well, the program clearly works. I need to
Mm.
invest more of my energy into that and trust that process a lot more.
And come on, it's the Cox four, like
It's a gold medal. I don't care if it's knitting, if it's sewing, if it's in shoe shining. I don't care. It's a gold medal is a gold medal. And after that, we we have won basically a gold medal at under 23s for Canada every year after that, and they started it. So they were a huge inspiration to me. And Tim Shriver, the guy who stroked that cock sport, was, for me anyways, a really great mentor for, like, here's what to expect, here's what it's all about, like going my first time, and how to build my season up and things like that. So that really helped. And my teammates, what was so nice about it too was 3 of us were returning from the year before, and we had 1 new guy come into the boat, and I ended up moving from 2 seat to stroke seat. But I wasn't even the initial person to stroke that boat. My coach didn't think that I had what it took, and I worked really hard to be the
spotting a bit of
person
a
who could stroke
pattern here.
the Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm definitely guilty of trying to improve myself at every turn. Uh, what I need to,
Taylor,
but
You can't file my taxes this year and sort all my accounts and all my bills this year. You
send them
definitely
over.
can't do it. Yeah.
Send them
Good
over.
on.
Send them over.
Good on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay, so cool, right? So started winning medals then. Okay, building like lots of success through the under 23s. I want to get to, like, before we make this too long, I want to get to your more the senior stuff that you're doing, like, and obviously worked with some pretty like successful seasoned coaches. Yeah, how did the transition from how did you find the transition from under 23 to senior?
Well, initially it was very tough. So 2015, I actually raced at under 23s with 2 bulged discs in my back and was completely numb on the outside of my leg. So I actually raced with that. If you
Wait,
watch over the
sorry,
race footage, you can see,
2015.
yeah, 2 days before we started racing, it flared up again, and I couldn't. It took me 20 minutes to get out of bed in the morning.
Oh God.
It was not the most pleasant experience,
I
but
had a back injury and I just stopped. I got that sore. I just stopped. I was like, this is too sore. I don't get you people set. Nah, yeah. Another guy I'm friends with, he's got a terrible back and he just keeps going. I'm like, Jesus. But anyway,
yeah,
sorry.
that's
Okay, fair enough. I
no,
heard
it's
a
okay.
really interesting Kat Granger before the
Mhm.
2011 World Champs. Her back was like so bad, and she was in the double with Anna Watkins. She
Yeah,
didn't want her doubles partner to see how bad her back was, so like they'd get up in the morning, the alarm would go off, and she'd stay in bed and be like, "Oh, I'll catch you at breakfast. I'll see you. I'll catch up," and then like would because basically she didn't want her doubles partner to see how she stood up because she had to like roll out of bed and then like slowly stand up in the morning.
I
And
did the exact same thing. I
did
did the
you
exact same thing.
hide it from your
Yeah,
teammates?
yeah. Well, 3 people knew, uh, and none of them were my teammates.
Wow.
The head coach did, the under 23 team coordinator, and the physio. And my coach, like 2 days before racing, was like, "I can call someone and fly them out here to fill in for you." And I'm like, I did not train this hard for this long to not be able to race this. Like,
Man.
and they basically said, if you're ever over like 9 out of 10 on your pain, we're gonna pull you from the boat. So every day I was like, yeah, I'm like
8.9. 8.9.
8.5, 8.6, but I was there were points where if I stood up funny or I went up the stairs too fast, like I was close to passing out
Ah, man.
from the pain. Yeah, and I was so determined to do it, and I didn't
I
realize how
wouldn't
bad it was until after. because, well,
Uh-huh.
like we won and it stopped hurting as much. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe a little bit is it's from like the anxiety and the nerves and the pressure because you were just I was in a pressure cooker for a whole year, and then winning that suddenly the top came off and all the pressure was released. Um, but then 4 days later I couldn't walk, and then I had to take the rest of the summer off because I was supposed to go to the Egg Ballet World Championships in 2015 to try and qualify a double, but I couldn't.
Oh, really?
I couldn't. I couldn't. I couldn't walk. It was awful. So I just took
I
the
think
rest
you
of the
just
summer
weren't
off.
determined enough, Taylor.
I definitely could have tried a lot harder for
I'm
sure.
kidding on. I'm
Could,
kidding
could have
on.
could have grinded my teeth a bit more. Could have, yeah.
You've got like 20 other discs. You don't need all of them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just fuse them together, take it out. I don't need it. Yeah, yeah,
Disclaimer
yeah. You're right.
again, Jesus, we need to be careful here. People at home, if your back's sore, don't row. Do what I would have done.
You need to put a
Stop.
disclaimer on the intro. Yeah,
Yeah, we need
don't
about
listen to
four
anything
different
I'm saying.
ones. You've got a lot of good advice,
Uh,
but some of it you're gonna cause serious physical harm.
yeah, do it at your own risk. Proceed at your own risk. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. We're
Okay.
covered.
So just to get us back on track there, I had to sort of set the scene, if you will. 2017 was the first time I competed as a senior. Um, I went to my first senior World Cup, which was in Lucerne. And again, we got smoked. We were 15th out of 16 in the men's
Oof.
four. And it was like a 30-hour commute back home from Switzerland. And we took the scenic route. We like flew from Zurich to Munich to Heathrow to Montreal to Toronto to Calgary to Victoria. And the whole time I was awake, just like going, okay, this is how fast the rest of the world is. I know now how much more I need to improve. So if I have a bad race too, I'm mad at it at most for about 20 seconds, and then I just move on to the next thing. Like I know people who it takes them like 3 or 4 months to get over a bad race.
Yeah.
But to me, that was just like things fell into two categories with me. If you could do something about it, great, don't
Yeah.
worry about it. If
Very
you can't do anything
rational.
about it, great, don't worry about it. And so
Yeah, you sound very
it's funny how
rational with like your approach to a lot of things.
well, it's funny because it was so developed in my athletic life that having to pull that out and use it in my actual life was like took a lot more practice to do. But
Yeah.
2017, so yeah, we went to that World Cup in Lucerne, and we trained like mad the rest of the year. We ended up getting two new people into the crew, and we went and raced in Florida in the hottest conditions I've ever been in. Like it was 44 degrees the day of our semifinal. It was so hot and humid. Um, and we ended up coming eighth there, which for us was like, okay, yeah, we didn't quite crack into the A final, but we've like this crew has been together for 2 months, 3 months, and we came
Yeah.
eighth. Um, so for me, that was like a pretty good progression. And then that fall, Dick Tonks was hired as the head coach. So we were coached by Terry Paul before that. He was my under 23 coach in 2015. And then he coached us throughout
Yeah.
2017 in the four. Um, and I had basically just switched to international sweeping at that point because I'd never had any international experience sweeping, though I swept all through high school and a little bit of my development before I made the team. Um, that was a really steep learning curve because I was training and racing against guys who had gone to like UW or Cal or
Yeah.
Brock University, Western University, UVic, UBC, who had done all of their development as sweepers, and I was now having to go up against that. It was again another challenge that I wanted to take on to just like mix it up a little bit.
With a bad back as
And then
well. How was your back at sweeping?
it was fine, but I would say after I heard it, I was never 100% confident in it. I always felt like I had to
Yeah.
hold back just a little bit because I trained like a madman in 2015. Like I was absolutely off my rocker with my training in 2015. Just was like
Never go
every
2015, Taylor. Never go 2015, Taylor.
no, no, oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, once was enough, but after that I think I took a much more measured approach. um if I don't have to sacrifice my body on an 18-kilometer row, so that I could do better on a 2K race piece. And it actually helps me like develop
Mhm.
my system properly, and it doesn't interfere with my recovery, then that was the route that I was going to take.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess there's maybe
but
something you can take from those like short term, maybe being fully bought into something for, and you can express that in a lot of ways. And maybe the easiest way to do that initially is sort of just reckless, like full on as training as hard as you can. Then moving on from that, you maybe realize it's not the most sustainable way. And you can do that in a bit more calculated approach where you're still fully invested in looking, but you've learned through being exposed to it, like what you do and don't respond to, maybe.
I wasn't training every session as hard as I could. Like everything had definitive intensities. So, and I was quite disciplined with that. Like every Friday night, for example, we would do 4x6.
Sorry, hold on. I knew that was gonna happen. So every Friday
Is that
night,
your?
sorry, Tokyo's freaking out.
Oh, I like that dog's name.
Sorry. Sorry about that. I can edit that. Um,
That's okay.
hold on. Yeah, hold on.
You want to take like 30 seconds, and I can run to the washroom real quick,
Yeah,
and we
yeah,
can
cool.
just
So
cut
just
this
hold
out.
that thought. You were at every Friday night, and then he started freaking out. So yeah, go
Yeah,
and have a break.
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I will be right back. Take two.
Cool, no worries.
Okay, so every Friday night, we would do 4x6K on the rowing machine, and 3 minutes rest, 18 strokes a minute, and we would always get our lactate checked throughout the year whenever we did that. And uh, I knew exactly what my 2 millimole lactate was, or my 2 millimole wattage was. And if I had a day where I was feeling really good, I would say to myself, you are not going to go 1 watt faster or a tenth of a split faster than this, no matter how you feel. And then on days when I was like really exhausted by the end of the week, it sometimes took like all my mental energy to just be able to stick to that. Um, but what it allowed my body to do was to fall into like a predictable rhythm. So I wasn't having days where I was performing really well and others because I felt good, and then not performing well because I was um, exhausted. So I really I looked at it as having gears, so to speak. So like first gear was like um, we use a slightly different like physiological tracking system than you guys do. So like first gear would have been like UT2, second gear would have been UT1, uh,
Sure.
threshold would have been like gear 3, racing would have been gear 4, and then 5 and 6 would have been like anaerobic capacity pieces and like sprint pieces. So I was really like staying inside those boxes with that. So it was always like a fairly measured approach that I took. And if I had to if I had to stick in a particular training zone, I was really disciplined to just like to just stick with that. And a lot of that changed when Dick Tonks came to the team at the end of 2017.
Yeah. How are you feeling? Bit of a reputation behind him. How are
Well,
you feeling with him coming in?
well, I got a call from
So
our
actually,
high.
just for those that don't know, Dick Tonks, he coached the Kiwi pair, who's probably argue, I mean, yeah, like the best crew of all time. 69 undefeated races in a row, two gold medals at the Olympics, world record holders. 608 in a pair, which won't be touched for a long time. But anyways, okay, Dick Tonks was coming in.
So obviously he like came to Canada with a bit of a reputation based on that. I would implore anyone before they make a judgment call on his character to read the Kiwi Pair book and sort of come up with one themselves. Um, and I've talked very briefly with Hamish and Eric about what Dick is like. Um, Obviously, you hear. First of all, you can't ignore the fact that he's been a very successful coach. So, like, yes, he coached the Kiwi pair, but he also coached Mahe Drysdale. He also coached the Ever Swindell twins to two gold medals. Mahe himself to two gold medals. He coached Rob Waddell to two world championship golds, three indoor uh, world championship titles, one of them being the world record. I think he was the first guy to go under 540 on a 2K. And then you had uh, and then of course Rob won a gold medal in the single at the Sydney Olympics. So you couldn't deny the fact that he was an effective coach for those particular athletes. But after reading the Kiwi Pair book, you know, I approached it the way of like, look, um, I have no reason to not believe Eric and Hamish's stories and Rob's
Hmm.
own story from what he dealt with Dick Tonks, but um, I looked at it as like, look, he's a human being. There's going to be three sides to every story, and if a situation like that ever happens, where I find that I'm not liking how I'm being treated, only then will I make a decision to not, or at that point I'll have to make a decision on whether I want to keep an athlete coach relationship with him going or not. But until that happens, if it happens, he is going to have my utmost respect, my
Yeah.
utmost attention, and so and for myself, anyways. And when I speak about him, it's only my experiences with him. I know other people have had different experiences with him on the team, but I had a fairly good relationship with him,
Uh-huh.
and it was actually kind of exciting when he came because I felt like it was sort of the push that we needed to have when he came in the fall of 2017. Um, and his philosophy was miles make champions, and he was so prolific of a coach, in fact, that Mike Spracklin, who used to coach for Canada, um, used to joke with his guys that if they thought that the program wasn't hard enough, he could give them Dick Tonks's program. And Mike had a notoriously difficult training regime. So the fact that Mike himself held Dick's program above that, just sort of goes to
Hmm.
speak about the things that you do and
Did
the
then
things
did
that
Dick hold any programs in? Was he like, oh well, you thought my think my program's bad? Did he? You should think about that. Did he have any? But or is Dick at the top?
he spoke very highly of Jurgen, of
Oh, did he?
course, the GB coach. Well, I mean, if you win a gold medal with a crew at every Olympics since '72, I mean, you have to uh, tip your hat to somebody like that. So um, obviously, Jurgen being as successful as he is, and finding a formula to just like churn out really good performances,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody. I don't even know if like the American women's eight was able to win the eight 5 times in a row in the Olympics the same way that you guys like won the men's four. So so
Mm. Yeah.
he obviously held him in very high regard, but
Yeah.
I
Just
don't
for
think
those that don't know, Jurgen was the GB coach for like 90s through to 2020 or something like that. Um. Okay. So yeah, what was the training program like?
Um, a lot of volume, a lot of volume. And so at the time I was balancing it with school. So I'd row with the national team in the morning, and then in the afternoon I would row with the University of Victoria. And it didn't dawn on me how much volume the team was doing until I flew home for Christmas, uh, December 2017, and I bumped into one of my teammates, Dave DeGroot, and he was like, when are you coming back? Like, you really need to be here. And I was like, okay, well, I got exams, like end of February, and then or like middle of March, sorry, and then I'll be back shortly after that. And he's like, we rode 1,000 kilometers in December. You're 1,000 kilometers behind us. Like, if you don't get back sooner full time, you will never catch up. And so I was like, okay, I need to I really need to get going with this. You mentioned earlier about hardest training sessions with Dick. Every session was very hard because of the competitive nature of it. Like, we were basically racing each other around the lake at 18 strokes a minute every day, 18, 20, 22 strokes a minute every single day. And we had days, Jack, where we were doing like twice a week. We were doing almost 2 marathons worth of rowing a day, twice a week.
Two
Like,
marathons
almost
a day.
almost like we had some the fall of 2018. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but we were doing twice a week. We were doing like almost 70 kilometers in a day across 3 sessions.
Oof.
Yeah. But I got really fit doing it too. And that training year, like the 2017-18 year, was the fittest I have ever been in my entire life. So it worked. His philosophy was that if you row at a particular speed at 18, like a particular velocity on the water, I can't remember what percentage of world's best time he had it set at, but fairly high. If you were able to do that, you'd be good enough to win uh, a gold medal at the World Championships. And every day we were basically going out and trying to chase that number. But the speeds that he had us rowing in a single, for example, it was like around, like, I think about 2 minutes per 500 meters in a single, which is quite fast at 18.
Yeah.
We were training pair at like 157 per 500 meters. So now we were having to do that in the single. So it was a really, really big step up. And some guys could do it. Some guys could do it for half of a session. Some guys could do it for spurts in a session. But the fitness on the team really improved. And what was so nice is when you went to a regatta, you had done so much rowing. Like, if you're used to rowing 40 kilometers a day, like a
Yeah.
marathon a
2K
day
is
was
the easy part.
meaningless. Yeah, you race at a world championships with 3 races, like 6 kilometers. It's nothing. It's over like that. So your preparedness is like as best is the best it possibly could be. And so he really put a big emphasis on rhythm and miles, and just ingraining in those habits mile after mile after mile after mile. That
Okay.
was his whole training philosophy.
Could you give me an example of like a training week with Dick Tonks, like Monday to Sunday?
So um, I'll lay out the structure of the week first. So Monday would be 2 sessions, Wednesday would be 3 sessions, or sorry, Monday would be 2 sessions, Tuesday would be 3 sessions, Wednesday would be 1 session, Thursday would be 3 sessions, Friday would be two, Saturday would be one, Sunday would be off. And most of the sessions that you were doing on the water were like 20 kilometers at a time. So you would row, Monday would be like 20 kilometers in the morning, 20 kilometers in the afternoon. So the morning would be in pairs. You'd go off single file every 30 seconds, like time trial
Yeah.
style, around the lake, basically racing each other. And you'd finish that in like about an hour and 20 minutes, I would say. So you're going pretty quick. Um, he also didn't want us to stop at either end of the lake. It was basically like turn the boat around as fast as you can and keep going. So because of our flow pattern on the lake, our starboard guys got really, really strong because they were having to reef the boat around the buoys at either end. So it
Nice.
was, yeah. And you might take like a little squirt of water if you have a chance to, if you had a chance to, but most of the time it was like you're gonna just do the whole thing straight through without stopping. Um, And then on the days when we had 3 a day, so Tuesdays and Thursdays, um, it'd be 20K in the morning, an hour on the erg at rate 20, second session, and then 20 in the afternoon. But those 20K session in the morning and the afternoon, that didn't include the 4K warm up and the 1K cool down. So you
Mm.
got 25 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon. And the standard for the heavyweight men was basically like 146, 145 at rate 20 on the rowing machine. So you're doing 17 kilometers on that. So 25, 17, 25, 60, 67K for those sessions. But
What
then
would some of
Wednesday
the
morning,
big dogs do? What would some of the bigger ergs do?
uh, you'd see guys like in the low 140s, definitely. Like um, you'd see guys like Kai Langerfeld, Martin Baraxo, Ben DeWitt, Conlon, like all those guys were doing um, like under 144, I'd say, depending on the day. Um, Pretty impressive watching them do that. We had a lightweight on the team who ended up, he's got I think 4 or 5 world records, or 4 world records and a Canadian record on the erg. He was keeping up with some of the heavyweights. Aaron Latimer, he was going 145 for an hour, and he would basically like lay back all the way flat when he was doing those pieces. It was the most impressive thing. And there was a 3 week period where somebody was breaking a world record on either an hour piece or a 5K or a 10K, or if we would do like a 6K test, somebody would be breaking that. So really, really impressive how the team progressed.
So
Wednesday
if you
would be
do
like
a
a
lot
five.
of training, you get good.
Yeah, like you practice anything over and over again, you do it. But I'd put like a little asterisk next to that. If you do the same thing over and over again very well, you will get very good. But if you do
Yeah.
the same thing over and over again without the attention to detail, without thinking about how it's going to impact the boat at race pace, you're just practicing a lot of crap. So
Yeah,
you,
I
you
guess
need.
trying to move the boat quick at 18, you could row quite stupidly, couldn't you? And go a bit quicker.
Well, I find that well, even if you just look like from a biomechanical standpoint, you could row basically full length up to I think about 24 strokes a minute, and then after that, the stroke will get a little bit shorter as the rate comes up.
Yeah.
So and you would see that with some guys. I knew guys that could go like absolute stink at 18, 20, 22 in the pairs, and then as soon as it would sort of step up a little bit, they might lose that same kind of effectiveness on the boat.
Yeah.
Um, because it's just exaggerated at a higher rate. So
That was a big
there's
thing for me. Like when I learned to just, I was always trying to row full slide and rate 32, and I could never do it. So,
that,
yeah,
yeah, it's
a big thing was just
it's not
rowing
easy to do.
shorter.
Yeah, so and it's also like what's effective. Like
Yeah.
I always looked at racing as I need to repeat the same movement 240 times, and the way that it felt 50 strokes into the race, I want to feel that same length, that same power output when I'm 150, 180, 200 strokes into a race. So, how do I repeat the same movement over and over again and make it effective? So, like the same length and power I have, say, 300 meters in, I want to have that same thing 13, 14, 1500 meters in before I start to wind up to the finish line. So because it's not 240 different strokes, it's one stroke 240 times that you're trying to replicate. So that's why it's so important with doing all that volume that you're trying to replicate what you're doing at race pace as often as you can. And that was the way that I approached it, was
Okay.
to just make sure that there was no there shouldn't be a big difference between. You've probably heard coaches who say there shouldn't be that big of a difference between what you do in training versus what you do when you're racing. Or you'll have people
Mm.
on race day who like try something different or do something different. So um, I always tried to take the things that made um, me an effective racer and break them down and slow them down and practice that at 18. And rowing's a really strange sport because in cycling, for example, I could go out and ride for 5 hours at 95 cadence, my RPM,
Yeah.
and I could do a 20-kilometer time trial that would last like um, you know 25 minutes, 24, 23 minutes, and average 95 RPM. So I'm able to practice that the whole time and race at that. But rowing is interesting because you practice at almost half of your racing cadence. Um, Like if you race at 36, 18 strokes a minute is essentially half of that.
Hmm.
So it's knowing how to be able to take that and slow it down and like, okay, the looseness that I want to feel at race pace, I need to practice that every day. I'm going to practice exactly how I want to
Yeah.
breathe. I'm going to practice exactly how I'm going to come onto my feet, how my oar is going to go into the water, how I'm swinging with the crew, how I'm applying pressure through the stroke, like getting on the first, couple.
Hold on.
I'm here.
Hello.
G'day.
Sorry about that. Tokyo's going
That's okay.
fucking mental.
That's that's okay.
Yeah, Pauline's not here, so she can't. Hold on. So sorry, yeah. So yeah, you were saying?
Just being able to take those same principles from what makes you effective as a racer and being able to practice them in your steady state thing. So you can definitely row a certain way to win a piece at 18, 20, 22, 24 strokes a minute. It's not necessarily going to translate into speed as you go higher up. I've always found that racing is more like high cadence, uh, steady state training,
Yeah.
rather than it being like you train at this power at 18 and you race at this power up here. Like
Yeah. It's
the amount of
tappier. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's I had all kinds of coaches that used analogies, but one of them that like really resonated with a lot of people was if you have your if you have a bicycle wheel and you're tapping through the spokes to keep the wheel spinning, you've got to put your finger in the spokes and turn it effectively enough so that you're not like getting your finger jammed in there. So you can't like really whack it in at the catch
Hmm.
and then go because you're going to end up stopping the spinning of the wheel. So you've got to be really, really quick with your movements, and with that comes a little bit of lightness too.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky to learn that as a sculler because when you race in an 8, that's a 5.5 minute race. When you race in a single, that's 7 minutes. That extra minute and a half makes a huge difference. It makes a massive difference, just like physiologically, what you can handle. So that's why you typically see people who are really good small boat movers translate that really well up into the bigger boats.
Hmm.
Um, there are of course exceptions to that, but you learn very quickly like, okay, I cannot row a single race the same way I would race an 8 race. Like punch out really hard and then just like sit in a rhythm, and then just be able to tap it out until I can bring it up again at the finish line because it's all you, it's all on you. So um, for preparedness, I would say that Dick's program was probably one of the best in terms of just like having confidence for showing up to a regatta, knowing that you'd done that much work, like most likely more work than anybody else had done. Um, but I think it's the athlete's responsibility to bring the quality into it too, and to make sure that you're doing it
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. You need to, I think there's a big thing that people will often miss as well as going into a good program. And two big coaches that helped me get into the GB team. I'll know people that will join their program and they'll be like, like any tips? Like, what do I do? It's just like, just do what they say. Just like,
Yeah,
like just actually, because so many people just don't actually, like, I guess you would get told by Dick, like, paddle at these speeds, do this distance. And yeah, you, like you're saying, you need to take a lot of the ownership in, yourself. But a lot of people can go into a program with a lot of doubt and like no buy-in, um and end up just executing it terribly and get halfway through the winter and wonder why they've not gone anywhere. So yeah, it's certainly not easy to buy into a program that's as hard as that, but I guess
it was
he
it was
had
definitely
the evidence.
it was definitely a very high, and I could see why it was effective. even in spite of the fact that you look at all those athletes I mentioned that he coached, like Rob Waddell, the Everson Waddell twins, Mahi Drysdale, Murray and Bond, like um, they are all of the like 700 something international rowers that there are in the world. They are the top 10th of the 1%. So they are like the anomalies,
Yeah.
like the best. Yeah. So so you could make an argument like, maybe Dick made those programs that hard so that if he got somebody like that, they would actually excel on it very well. But uh, I really liked how prepared I was going into battle. It was like I knew exactly what to expect. And quite oftentimes, the training was way harder than any race that I did when Dick
Yeah.
was my coach. Definitely, without a doubt, without a doubt. Um, and you went to the bottom of the well, so to speak, where you had to dig really deep. And every time you went there, you had your shovel with you, and you were making it wider and making it deeper every single
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
Yeah, I had
definitely.
one of my coaches, Ricky, who made a big difference. No, like the program was nowhere near that mileage. The hardest thing we would do is the kind of weekends where it would be like 40K each day, but like 20K of it would be basically as hard as you could go, like pieces. And we'd always get to like the Sunday afternoon or the Sunday morning being like and the program was building towards that point and just genuinely questioning if you can actually do like a piece that because you're so tired. I think there's so much. It's not just like the physical side of it, I guess, the fitness. It's like showing yourself what you can really do. And like when you get to a point where you just feel like there's nothing less, I guess you would have got a lot of that on Dick's program. And you're like, you're staring down the barrel of like a super long, hard session. And you're just like, I don't think I can do this. But then you go out and you do it and you just keep, stacking up wins like that and like what your ability is. I guess there's so much more power than, your lactate threshold increased by 0.3% this year. It's like how
Which
much
is
did
huge at that level. Yeah, like
yeah,
I'll
but
take
it's
a
like
10th.
yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah,
how much does those mental wins like you'd imagine they'd be so much more significant, I guess.
definitely. And it I always looked at it as the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire and taken out and hammered and cooled and stuck back in and taken out and hammered and cooled and stuck back in. And so I treated all those training sessions like that, as hard as they were. But it that 2018 season was a real roller coaster for me because like for the first time in my entire rowing career, I wasn't making the top crews. So to answer your question about what was the hardest training sessions, I would say it was Dick's seat racing. That was the
Oh
hardest.
yeah.
Like, yeah, the days were long, but the seat racing was. Um, so I seat raced to try and get my spot back in the four, which I had raced in 2017 in Florida, and we did 18 1,500 meter pieces in 2 days. One of them we did 10 in one day, and that ride me. And they weren't like slower pieces. Like the one afternoon when we did 7 pieces, like both fours going head to head were going under 4.5 minutes. So like basically under a 6 minute pace in March. So like that was in flat water on Elk
Yeah.
Lake, which is not a fast lake. Like we were going very fast, and I ended up losing my seat to Conlon McCabe, and I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to lose to anybody, I'm okay losing to Conlon. Um, and he went 7-0 against me. So, but I lost that whole thing. Like I had like 15 bad seconds over just that last afternoon because I actually did quite well up until that point. But again, not being at the center and splitting my time between being there and being at school definitely cost me. But I walked away from that experience going like, okay, I know that I need to work on my aerobic base. I know that my technique falters when I get really fatigued in these pieces, and I
Yeah.
know that my malleability to a crew and the way that I form into a crew needs work, especially when I'm tired and not. I wouldn't say that I was out of shape. I just wasn't in good condition to be able to be effective in a crew. Um, and then I tried to break in later in the year for the Lucerne World Cup in July, and I think I only lost out then by about like 2.5 seconds. So I knew at that point, like, okay, I can expect Dick Seat Racing to be like, almost um, however much 1,500 meter pieces is, like 23, 24 kilometers of racing in 2 or 3 days. I knew what to expect from that. So I was like much better prepared because he
Hmm.
doesn't tell you how many pieces you're going to do. He just says, okay, go again. This is the switch, go again. This is the switch, go again.
Hmm.
Um, Now I had like a pretty good understanding of what to expect. So, um, and then I ended up missing out on that. And then we came back and we did another round of selection for the eight, which was the top boat that went to Worlds in 2018. Um, and it ended up coming down between myself and my friend Dave DeGroot. We raced, I think, 7 or 8 pieces in the eight over the course of a week, so it was a little bit more tolerable. Um, and he beat me every single time, but by no more than a second. So I was close every single time. So I actually got selected as a spare to go and race at Worlds in the pair in 2018. And Dick told me like, look, you performed really well. I could have put you in there, but Dave beat you every single time. And I'm like, that's the decision you have to make.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel good if you picked somebody who was um, faster. I would have felt really bad if you had picked somebody who was faster or slower than me, I would say, and then put me in instead.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't have felt like I was like wholly
Yeah.
contributing with that. So I was totally fine with that. And that whole year, I was like, okay, well, I need to prepare myself for if, not when, but if an opportunity comes along to be able to go fast in a crew with anybody, I need to make sure that I'm preparing for that so that when that happens. And the guy who I was selected in the pair with, um, he ended up having to go into the eight to fill in for a guy who was injured. And so Mackenzie Kopp, who ended up being my pair partner that summer, he came out of the eight and came into the pair with me. And the first day that we were together, we did this is like a month before, uh, uh, maybe about a month before the World Championships in Plovdiv in 2018. We did a standing 500 meter and a standing thousand meter piece against our lightweight double, who had come fourth at 2 World Cups in the year, and we beat them on raw time on both pieces. And we were kind of like, wow, okay, so we've like got some speed. We were going like 130 for 500 meters, and we were going, I think, like 305 or 306 for 1,000 meters. So I'm like, okay, we've like got some speed in the crew. Our fourth day together, we did a 1,500 meter piece, just like a start and a body, and we did 4 minutes and 37 seconds over 1,500 meters. So we did a 132 and a half average, and I remember finishing that piece and sliding up and clicking the stroke coach off, and Dick's at the finish line, and he didn't say anything to me. He just gave me a thumbs up. I'm like, I know we went pretty fast, and that was as much as him like whooping and hollering at the finish line. Like he spoke a lot with that. So um, came up to Mac and I after with his spreadsheet of our times, and he showed it to us, and like top of the prognostics, faster than everybody else. And he's like, maybe we'll just like keep the two of you together to see how this goes. And we stayed in the pair for the rest of the season. And by the time that season finished, we were together for 32 days. And we had it was the least stressful World Championships I had ever been to, because it was we went in knowing that we were fast, which was really great. We also only had the two of us to manage, and he and I got on very well. Like we talked about everything all the time. We didn't leave any stone unturned, and I think because we didn't have that much time, we were able to focus like that intensely on what we had to do. Um, but when we raced our heat, we broke the Canadian record in the pair by 5 seconds. And so we finished that and we're like, okay, this is good. And we beat South Africa, who were the Olympic silver medalists from Rio. So we're like, okay, that's pretty good. And then we raced our quarterfinal. We had the Czech Republic, who had won World Cup 2 earlier that year. And then we had the Kiwis as well, who ended up winning Lucerne that year. And then both of those guys ended up going on and winning the eight at the Olympics. and we beat both of them in our quarterfinal by like I think 4 and 9 seconds respectively. And when we finished that, we're like, oh shit, this just got real. Like, okay, we're it's one thing to beat people who did something 2 years ago. It's another thing entirely to like go up against crews that like have actually done something that year. So we ended up being the only Canadian crew through the World Championships in that quadrennial to make an A final at a World Championship. So that was a really big accomplishment for us, coming fourth there and having a really good week of racing and being really consistent and getting to race against like the Sinkovich brothers and the Onfroy
Hmm.
brothers from the that was a really cool experience just to sort of see like where all that was going. So 2018 was a real roller coaster because it was like
Yeah.
get a new coach, not making any crew, not making any crews, not making any crews, and then doing really well at the World Championship. So that really helped my confidence as a sweeper because at that point it was like, okay, I felt like an imposter, like I was a sculler in a sweeping boat, and at that point I'm like, okay, I feel like I've kind of earned my stripes a little bit as a sweeper. So that was really big for me.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. And then yeah, what did the kind of timeline of your career how did yeah, it sort of finish off your competitive career?
So 2019 was my last World Championships. We moved into the eight at that point. Like Mac and I ended up moving into the eight, and uh, he and I actually got beaten like probably 6 weeks after that, after Worlds at our national championships by Kai Langerfeld and Colin McCabe, who ended up going and racing that boat at the Olympics. Um, and we were just never in the pair after that. But every time we'd go and race Conlon and Kai, who were spending like every minute of every day in that boat, we always tried to race them, and we would come like quite close to them, and we never had a chance to like break back into it. But we were always willing to throw down to just show like, okay, well, you guys beat us fair and square to get into here, but we really thought, if we ever had a chance to beat those guys to get back into it, that we would do it because we
Yeah.
thought that if we had enough in the pair that we would be able to do it. So 2019 we get into the eight. There was a bit of a fracture in the team at that point, so Terry Paul ended up coming and coaching the eight, and then Dick took the rest of the guys and Carling Zeman and coached them. So we were basically like training on our own and just having to be competitive with each other, like in pairs and in fours and whatnot. So we ended up going to the World Cup in Poznan and we came third in the eight there. And so for us, that was huge. It's the first time the Canadian eight had been back on the podium since 2012, and we thought that we would be able to go to the World Championships and at the very least qualify the eight, and we came eighth. We just didn't have the best lead up to the regatta. I know for myself personally, like I was having to fill in for somebody on my opposite side in that last month, which is like the most important month for me in my training year. Like you're sharpening the knife at that point. Like your work, the majority of your work is basically done. And
Hmm.
I was being a good sport and being a good teammate and filling in for somebody on my opposite side because I'm like, I know how to peak for a race. I've done it enough times. I've got confidence that I can do it. But I don't know if it was a matter of us like maybe training too hard or if it was us just not really finding our mojo. But we left that championships pretty dejected. And then we came back from that, and there was a whole bunch of um, inter squad politics, and I'll just like kind of leave it at that.
Yeah.
That was fun, and at that point, I sort of was faced with like two decisions: like, do I continue on? And I couldn't imagine training any harder than I did in 2019. Like I trained my tail off in 2019. I couldn't imagine going up another level because I felt at that point like I'd maximized everything, and I knew it was different than 2014 when I was like, I'm already at my best. How do I get better? I was like, I had maximized everything at that point, and and then and then there was a whole bunch of like people moving around and people getting cut. Like a third of the team got cut, and they decided that we're gonna like go and try and win the four at the Olympic Games, and I was like, okay, well that's a pretty tall order. Like we were 15th out of 16 in the four at a World Cup. We were 8th out of 16 in the four in 2017,
Hmm.
and then World Cup one in 2018. The four was 19th out of 20, and now we're gonna like put most of our eggs in that basket and like go and try to compete against the Brits, the Aussies, the Dutch, the Germans, the Poles, the Italians. Like I just to me that seemed like a really really tall order. Like it's really easy to put four guys together and make them go fast. Um, but we just hadn't really found um, it that like thing that makes a four go fast, and the four that ended up going to that Olympic Games did quite well. I don't know if I could have influenced it to make that four go any faster, but at that point I was 26 and I was battling a bunch of injuries in my body, like my back, my hip, and I was like, okay, well I could carry on, try and go to this Olympics in Tokyo, and potentially not get the result that I want, and then have to end my career on that note. Or I decide to take a little bit of time off, come back, and then go through potentially that same process again, get out when I'm 31, having not worked a job since I was 19, having not really established my professional life, and like really have to figure out what I'm going to do. And that took me a long time. That took like a good solid 3 weeks of like 8 hours a day of thinking of like what's my plan, what's my
Hmm.
plan. And then I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to bow out now and just like take a step back, to preserve my love for the sport,
Yeah.
and to allow my body to heal, because yeah, I might not have rowing for the rest of my life, but I need my body for the rest of my life. And I wasn't willing to put it through any more abuse is really the only word I can think of.
Yeah.
And I felt that in order to do it, just the last thing is, I felt like I would have had to have parted with like part of my soul to be able to do it, and
Yeah.
something like like I was not willing to do that. I was not willing to give up everything for the potential of something happening, because it was sucking the love away from it. So
Yeah.
so uh, so yeah, my last session was like November of 2019, and then I went back to school after that.
Nice.
And
Okay. Well, yeah.
like
I
yeah,
mean, I think yeah. First off, like a huge congratulations on your career, and I think you talking about kind of wanting to be in a position earlier on of just knowing that you've left no stone unturned. You can certainly say that you've done that, and I think that's the most fulfilling thing. And I think it's yeah the fastest the path to your best version, but more so the path to like full fulfillment. So yeah, just a big congrats, and then the way that
thank
you
you.
approached everything, and um yeah, obviously like didn't get anywhere near to the level that you were at, but I remember when I first got selected into the GB team, and it was it was a huge dream come true for me to go and race my first World Cup and get an international vest. But I got loads and loads and loads of congratulations about it, and it was yeah, it was nice and I was grateful for it, but there was almost a sort of hollow feeling to it because um I was only being recognized for like that final step from like step 99 to step 100. And for me, what I was most fulfilled and happy with and proud of was the work I did to get there, not going from just about to be selected to one message later being selected. Like, what was the difference with that? So, and yeah, I think being able to do it on your own terms is great as well. So, um, yeah, I think, yeah, you're, a really really like valuable story as well, like the way that you're talking about everything. So um
I was sad to walk away when I did, because I felt that I was letting my teammates down, and that took a long time for me to get over it. And
okay.
watching them go to the Olympics and have to deal with them not reaching their own goals that I knew about. These are guys that I had, you know, eat eaten rowing, breathed rowing, and sweat and bled over it with them for some of them like 7 years. It was tough to watch them go through it, but Rowing Canada is going through a rebuilding process now, and we've definitely got some people who are looking like they could do something really great in Paris. So I know I'm looking forward to that. But um, I was I was more concerned about just like preserving uh,
Yeah.
my love for the sport, and
I know what you
wanting
mean.
to be able to share my experience with other people, like, whether you go and get an international vest to uh one regatta, whether it's a World Cup or a World Championships, or I've got teammates who have been competing since 2004 that are still in it. Like, there's still a lot of experience that you can extract from that, and it took time to sort of separate who's Taylor the athlete and who's Taylor the human, because I'd been doing it for half my life at that point. So
Mhm.
it took time to extract that out of it.
Yeah.
But I'm really fortunate that I got out when I did, and um, I'm asked often if I regret not being able to go to the Olympics, and I would say that, well, first of all, the short answer to that is no, and the long answer to that is also no. Um, but becoming an Olympian, you become an Olympian when you go to an Olympic Games. But one thing I tried to do every day was to try and embody what the Olympic spirit was, and being a good competitor, being having good sportsmanship, and having really good conduct as a competitor, and I really tried to live up to those every single day. So I don't have any regrets about having to stop when I did. I don't feel
Mhm.
like I robbed myself of experience by leaving. Um, I I want to see the sport progress and move forward, and I don't think I would have been able to have done that if I had continued on and possibly been in a worse situation when I left after that than having gotten out when I did. So
Mhm.
so
Good
so
for you.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you very much.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'd obviously, yeah, don't want to hear the ins and outs of the politics or whatever was happening for you to leave. That's, yeah, your story. But yeah, for me, it was like when I stopped, I just knew, I was like, this is not right for me. This is gonna take it away from me. I couldn't put up with what was going to be required mentally more than anything to do it. So yeah, I mean, I've actually got, like, I've got loads of my friends competing now, and they're going to be going to Paris. So I still don't
Awesome.
know what it's going to be like watching them. Not to say that I was in an Olympic seat when I left, but I was certainly within for a fight. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I don't know how I'll feel, but um,
Essentially, I was put into a position where I was selected to be in a group of people that was going to try out for a boat that had already been qualified, and I felt that I hadn't done anything to show that I deserved to be in that position, and that there were three or four or five other people that would have been ahead of me in line that needed to do it, and they didn't get a chance to do that, and that really ticked me off because um, the unity of the team is the strength of the team, and if you do anything to upset that apple cart, I felt that I had a target on my back, being moved into that particular group to try out for a boat that had been qualified. um, I didn't I didn't want to have that target on my back, but I also wanted other people who had at least been deserving of trying out for those seats, to have the opportunity to do that. um,
very honorable, man. I feel like you're the kind of person that would, like, find 5 pounds in the street and turn it into the police office.
Well, if there's no one else around, I would keep it for myself.
But no,
But
I'm saying is, like, just, yeah, very honorable.
thank you
I
for
have to
that.
say.
That's very nice of you to say. But I did not want to succeed on anything other than my own merit. I
Yeah.
didn't want to succeed based on a coach feeling a particular way about me,
Yeah.
or anything like that. If I earned a seat in a boat, I have pried it out of somebody's hands, and have earned the right to say, I won this seat fair and square.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I got given a seat and I knew that someone else was better than me. I think I'd take it.
and that's the other thing too, is like,
Fair play to you.
uh, I have two sort of ways that conversation goes when I talk to people about it. The first is, um, well, like you said, very honorable. You keep your you preserve the integrity of sport by making sure that, like, everybody's included, by making sure that nobody's left out for what you consider to be unfair reasons. And then the other side of that conversation is like, you gave up the potential to go to the Olympics. Like why would you do that? And I do not believe in winning at all costs. I
Yeah,
believe in doing everything you can to try and be successful. But I don't believe in like, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his soul? And I felt that I would have been giving up on one of my like key principles
good for you.
if
That's
I had
incredible, man.
decided. So um,
Yeah, I didn't mean to. I
the,
maybe
the,
shouldn't have been joking about that because I don't know. I was never in that
no,
situation, so
no,
I don't
no,
know.
it's
But yeah,
no, it's fine.
no,
I have.
it's really well put. I think it's a path to like you're putting winning on a pedestal and making it like if you're never enough, if you're not enough with it without it, then you'll never be enough with it. So, yeah, it's
Exactly.
certainly leading yourself down a path to like the kind of unfortunate post-Olympic depression and stuff. But, um, yeah, it's something Kath Bishop talks about a lot. Who's I'm sure I've recommended her book to you, but you should you should definitely read it if you haven't. It's like a great book, on all this sort of
I'll
stuff.
definitely check it out. I'll
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
check that out.
I'll send
Yeah,
you a copy. Yeah, I'll send you a copy. But yeah, no, I think yeah, you're like friggin' incredible person, man. Like, I think these
thank you.
it's
It's
very
great to chat
rare,
with you.
and I think yeah, we're like so lucky to have you on board with us, and I think just you like being open enough to have that conversation, I think is they kind of change that the sport, not just sport, but the world, the sporting world and the world in general, I think needs. So, I think you're doing a great job of like advocating for it because it's so rare.
Thank you. I really, sport is like one of the biggest communities that you can have, or one of the best communities that you can have, other than, um, you know, I've seen some, apart from the incredible performances that I've seen some really great uh, pieces of humanity come out of people supporting others in situations where they're like really going through it. Like, um, I mentioned earlier that I've missed out, weddings, funerals, births, graduations, and stuff. Like, um, my grandmother passed away in 2016, and I was very close to her. I would take her to church every Sunday, and it was too close to a major regatta that I was going to, that it would have disrupted the whole crew to go home. And my teammates at the University of Victoria, um, like they would come with me to get groceries. They would cook meals with me. They would come and spend time with me. Like I was I was so moved by the compassion for that. And it's things like that that you are reminded that, sport is so much bigger than just having to compete against somebody. And
Yeah,
that, there are and in 2019 when I left, that was like the first time I realized, like, all of the superstars that you see in sport are people too. They have feelings. They are vulnerable. They are not invincible. They've got
hmm,
things that they're battling that you have no idea what's going on. And I really came to learn that in 2019. It was like, yeah, we're all people too, just looking to get on with this. So, there's the self that you present to the world, and then there's the internal self that you have, and it was great, really, really seeing people who I knew to be like absolutely ruthless competitors, like would absolutely drive a stake through you, would come and pick you up at your lowest moments. So
yeah,
it was really great, people like that. And I try to foster that in all my athletes now that I coach. Is like, there's a lot more than, you are not a number on a spreadsheet. You are not a particular score that you do. There is so much there's so much more to the athlete than just what they're capable of doing.
hmm,
And I feel like the sooner you realize that in life, the more joy that you can have in anything that you do. So
yeah, and
so
it
so I try to do.
100%. And like that, like if you do that right and if you approach it that way, you're gonna enjoy it more and you're going to reach your potential sooner. It's just it's more sustainable, more enjoyable, but also like the best way to progress as well. And I think you're like a prime example of that. It's just it's I think it can be quite counterintuitive for a lot of coaches in a lot of toxic environments. So it rarely is fostered. So yeah, but No, look, I think that's like a really good note to end it on as well, rather than me butcher it and try and add on insight or something like that. Yeah, I just wanted to, yeah. Thanks again, Taylor, for doing this and sharing so openly so much of your the ups and downs of your journey. I'm sure people have taken away so much value from this. So, um, yeah, I think we can end it there.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. I've really appreciate this conversation we've had.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Bye everybody. Yeah, and you always like and share and subscribe. I always forget to do that. But anyways, cool. Okay. All right. Good.